It's on Goffstown Back Road, map 6, lot 1-2. This would be the self-storage site that is located on the back road near the Manchester line. We previously approved this plan a couple of years ago, to my recollection, and then there was a request that came in for some phasing for that same plan that we heard and was granted. And an issue has come up in regards to the status of that plan. You should have an email from William O'Connor from the fire department in regards to some code enforcement plan compliance issues. We have the owner's rep here today with a picture that you have been handed out. And Joanne, why don't you bring us up to date of where we are as far as the status on this?
Okay, if I could just make a correction on the memo dated March 8th, where it's the number 1 and number 2 refer to 2019. It should be 2018.
What memo are you talking about?
It's the memo from me to the planning board. It says
in our
Goffstown Back Road self-storage.
The packet one,
Yeah.
okay, all right.
So what happened with this plan is they had received approval for a site plan for the self-storage facilities a few years ago, and they came in last April with an application. So they came in to apply for their building permit, but at the same time they came in and with an application for the planning board meeting of last spring to do the phasing plan. So it like crisscrossed, and the building inspector went ahead and issued the building permit. However, the plan then changed after the planning board granted approval. So they were out there building under the old plan, but the plans were never submitted for signature, so we had no site plan that was signed. So recently they came in for the certificate of occupancy, and that's when it was discovered that the fire department hadn't done any inspections. I don't believe DPW had done anything. So they found, Eric and Sarah went out and did an inspection and found that the site had some things that needed to be looked at and changed, and there were also some changes that were made by the applicant that did not conform to the plan. So one of those was a fence, which the fence was installed partway around, but not the entire way, which is what was shown on the plan. The other one was outdoor storage, and they extended the length of the parking spaces to be able to do that. And then the other one was the lack of the handicap parking. So I didn't feel that I had the authority to say, oh yeah, go ahead. And they still had to address the issues that DPW had found. So I thought it was a good idea to bring the owner in and talk to the board, because now he has submitted the plans to be signed and submitted the as-built, which the as-built show what's there, but it's not what was approved. So he would like a chance, an opportunity to speak with the board members to figure out where we're going with this.
Joanne, I'm going to allow the board members to ask some follow-up, but how many buildings or how many storage buildings are on this site at this time?
2.
Okay, and the
3.
first one was
3, I'm sorry.
3?
That's quite all right. They're represented here on this plan. There are three that were
Okay.
completed, and they were
Okay.
approved.
Thank you. So I understand they were approved, but apparently there was, the first building was built according to the site plan before there was a
That was
phasing
like a while
request.
ago,
That was a
yeah.
while ago, building number 1.
Yeah.
Excuse me, could I interrupt?
No, you can't. Not right now. I want to thank you, sir, but I haven't had you identify yourself for the record, and I want to get the background for the board before we hear from you.
So the first building was actually up on Goffstown Road, near the
Right,
gas
the one
station.
right there,
And then these other 3 are part of Phase 2.
behind. Okay. So the first building, there were no issues with. Plan,
Right.
signed, built, CO, everything done.
Yeah,
Phase 2, no plan ever signed.
correct.
So that's an internal issue as to how anything even happened out there without a signed plan, right?
Yes.
Okay, not the applicant's issue at this point. I'm assuming he got permits. to
Right.
build.
He did.
Okay. Tim?
So could you please explain what the approved plan was and what is on the site right now?
So the approved plan had 2 phases to this area right here.
3.
3 phases to this area right here. There was the phase that they just built, there's the second phase, and then there's another phase with a smaller building.
Tim, they're represented on this plan to show the 3 different
Okay.
areas.
Sir, I'm going to ask you to actually step away from the table right now. Thank you.
So they had approval, I think it was back from 2016, to build something similar. The third building, or the third phase, had a larger building on it at that time. So they applied for their building permit and had never, the engineer had never provided us with the final plans to be signed. So
Understand that,
they
right.
went ahead and applied for their building permit. The building permit was issued, and they built what you see there.
Are they physically different than what was approved? That's my question for
The
you.
things that are different are there's a list from.
No. I think Tim is asking, are the buildings
The buildings
themselves?
are not,
Okay.
those 3 are not different.
So the footprint of the approved plan and the footprint of what was submitted after the fact
Is the same.
are
It's-
identical?
Is the same.
It's the site itself
Site,
that
okay.
has things that are different.
Now, my next question for you, I'll wait till it comes up. I'm going to move on, yield the floor right now.
All right. If no other member of the board has a question, Sarah, did you want to step in?
I think that might actually be incorrect. I believe the size of 3 buildings actually changed from the approved plans to the phasing plan. All of the buildings on the approved plan were 6,000 square feet, and on the phasing plan, I believe 1 was shown at 7,000 and 1 was shown at 5,000, so the total was the same, but those 2 buildings were slightly adjusted. And then initially, there were 2 buildings, 2 smaller buildings shown on one side of the site, and that was being combined to 1 building.
But, yeah, and that one's not built yet, though.
You didn't happen to bring the plan that was,
I have no, I don't have the plan. I do have the
Okay.
square footage. So Phase 2-1, which is the one we're talking about, is buildings B1, B2, and B3, which are 18,000 square feet each. And the associated paved areas is another 40,921 square feet. It's not the building, it's the fact that we had no signed plan and the fact that the site was not finished.
my concern is, are the buildings larger than what we approved?
No.
Okay, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
All right. So in follow-up to that, to clarify, based on what Sarah's comment was, when we approved the plan for the phasing, which has not been signed yet, were the buildings shown on that plan a different size, if you know, than the first plan?
Yes.
So when you say the buildings are built to the plan, it is to the phased plan?
Yes.
Okay.
The building that was smaller has not been built yet.
Right. The buildings that are there have been built to the unsigned phased
unsigned plan.
So we are talking about site issues as to the unsigned phased plan.
Correct. Things
Okay.
like rain gardens and,
Okay.
there's a lot of drainage things.
Right, and...
The whole
and-
list of them.
Okay, Tim.
So one more question. I heard mention of outside storage. Did we have a discussion regarding storage of vehicles outside on that property?
There was a condition of approval that no vehicles could be stored inside the buildings. There was a condition of approval on the phase that was along Goffstown Road that no buildings could be stored outside of the building, but nothing for this particular phase about being stored outside. When they
Was it not stated or not discussed?
I couldn't find anything in the minutes or stated. What they did was, they changed the number of parking spaces. So on the original plan, there were 5 parking spaces shown. 4 were supposed to be customer, and 1 was a handicap spot. When they did the phasing plan, they increased those amounts to 20, and in the field, striped a 30-foot length versus a 20-foot, which is what's required. So it looked like they were just increasing their parking. However, once we looked into it and saw that the striping was longer, and realized after talking with them that they're actually using it for outdoor storage.
And
for
did you check the
vehicles.
minutes of the meeting?
I did. I read through all the minutes.
Because it seems to me that would have been a point that we would have discussed.
The only condition, like I said, and I believe it came from fire, was that there couldn't be any indoor storage of vehicles. There's also, the fire department found a solar panel above one of the units that's hooked into something going on inside of one of the units. I don't know what it is, or he didn't know what it is either.
All right, and Joanne, can you refresh my recollection as to what generated the attention to this internally? What was the request that brought this all to light?
When whoever, I don't know who it was, but someone came in to get the certificate of occupancy so that they could move in, because there were people already who had moved in. There were a few people in there already. And that's when, everyone started looking through their files and said, wait a minute, we don't have this, this, and this.
And that relates as to the occupancy of these 3 buildings in the Phase 2. So at this point, the status is we have buildings that are being occupied without a CO, a plan that has not been signed, and even if one was to issue a CO at this point, this would have been one of those cases where town personnel inspected and said, you have remaining items on your plan, or you're not in compliance, but they relate to the site, not the building.
Correct. So for the items that I was looking at, which was the fence, the handicapped parking space, and there's one other thing. Those items,
Outside
The outside-
vehicular storage.
vehicular storage, I felt that that needed to come back to the board for a decision as to whether it was a material change or not. Because in my opinion, the fencing was part of the plan and it was never completed, and therefore, it's not correct. Sarah had a list of other items that she may want to discuss with you. I don't know where they're at as far as, because she was working with them to try to get through that list. The owner is looking for an answer as to whether or not these are a material change, and can he go forward with those changes. He's shown them on the as-built as to the way he wants it to go. The other one was the length of those storage spaces. However, each phase had a condition that they had to provide an as-built at the end of each phase. So he's done that, but he's provided the as-built with a plan that's not really the approved plan. So that's where I'm struggling with, that I think the board needs to.
And the as-built, in regards to the non-compliance with the site plan, relates to non-building items.
Yes.
Okay.
As far as I'm concerned, but like the fire department had comments and.
Right, well, they have
Yeah.
comments, but that doesn't have to do with the plan, right? As far as we're concerned,
It
the
had
plan.
to do with the gate and,
Right.
there's lots of issues. It's just.
Yes, there are a lot of issues. That's why I want everybody to understand that. I just wanted to make sure the board had an understanding of the timeline of events and what the issues are. And so we have an as-built plan being submitted, but no signed plan in existence to compare it to.
No, we don't have a signed plan. They submitted a plan
When was that submitted?
last week,
Okay.
and then they submitted the as-built.
Okay. All right, so we now have a plan, not signed, we have an as-built. The buildings on the as-built conform with the requirements of the plan. There are site-related issues in regards to it, and given the status, you're here before the board as to these changes that are going on the site that don't comply with the plan.
Correct.
So if if you had gone out there and everything on this site had complied with the plan that hadn't been signed, we'd just be signing the plan and.
Right.
Okay. All right, Tim.
So could you address number 8 on your list there? The fire department did not conduct site inspections that were required in the conditions of approval. What were they?
So those were the normal inspections that the fire department would do as the building was being constructed, as the
Okay.
site work was being done. They never called for a fire inspection, so he just did an inspection the other day. I think it was Friday.
And do we have the results of that inspection?
Yes, it was part of your,
Oh, okay, it's that thing. All right, thank you.
Before we decide how to proceed, I'm going to be curious as to,
I just saw it.
huh?
I just saw it.
The status of items as far as DPW goes. Sarah, are you able at this time to comment on when you went out to look at the plan that was approved and as to the site, just in general, have you been able to resolve most of the issues that you had?
So I met with the owner and we came up with a plan. They can't address some of the issues right now because of the snow. So our plan was to just, they would put a bond in place to take care of them in the spring and I would do another inspection. I was working on pulling together a bond estimate for him. The delay is because I was waiting to find out whether or not they were going to be required to install the fence because I would add that total to the bond.
Okay, great, thank you, Sarah. All right, any other questions from the board as to where we stand at this point on this issue? Tim?
So, Joanne, I think it would have been very helpful if we could have had the plans to look at tonight. The approved site plan,
I can go run
The-
upstairs if you want me to.
as-built plan, and so we can see how they all compare to each other.
Although I
mean,
only have that one.
Well, you're
set.
asking, we're being asked to make a decision on something we haven't seen, so I don't know how I can make a decision tonight.
Jim?
Just on one issue, there's a question on the outside storage, and I'm wondering how we address that. Outside storage of vehicles. And I'm a little hesitant to do that without some consideration of what was presented to us at the time we approved it in the ordinance. If you look at the definition of self-service storage facility, which I understand this was, doesn't expressly prohibit outside storage, but I don't think it was our understanding at the time. So that's a material zoning issue in my mind.
Other members of the board with questions? At this point, how does the board want to proceed? The owner applicant is here. I'm a little reluctant because it's not really an applicant. We're sort of doing a status review. We don't really have an application for anything. We're just trying to get straightened out what's going on. Does the board want to hear from the applicant as to the status and how they'd like to proceed, or make a determination as to what you want to do? And we need to make a decision one way or another because we've got noticed items on our agenda. Tim?
So I feel that it's as Jim has stated, it's a material change to have outside storage of vehicles at the site. Just because it didn't say they could do it doesn't mean they can do it in our conditions of approval. It's like the law. If it doesn't say you can do it, then you're not allowed to do it. So in the event that the applicant is willing to remove that, I think we could consider it this tonight, but because the issue of a fence, which as stated is at their discretion, in terms of a handicap spot, I think that if we wanted a handicap spot, I'm sure they could find a place to put a handicap spot in. But the business of the outside storage is a material change, in my opinion, and I don't think we can make a decision.
The handicap spot is a requirement of the zoning. However, they're saying that people, if you go back there, you wouldn't park your car in a spot. You would go right to your unit, but it is a requirement of the zoning.
Cannot waive.
I mean, if that was an issue, it should have been addressed at the time of the plan approval.
It was shown on the plan.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So if people didn't want to do a handicap spot at that
right.
hour, that's what I'm saying is the waiver for the
Mhm.
parking should have been addressed at that point in time. The practical recognition of outside parking spaces at a storage unit is a valid one.
So I think if the chair would like to permit the applicant to speak solely to the outside parking issue, that would be something that would determine whether we can discuss it or not.
And speak to the fencing requirement.
Right, the fencing
To me,
needs to be
it's-
addressed.
was presented as a plan that the renters of these units would have somewhat secure environment for their belongings, even though they're in a locked unit. It was presented with a fence around the whole lot.
And just to clarify, the fencing is not a requirement, however, it was shown on the plan.
And just in terms of the plans themselves, I don't think we can authorize a CO until we see the plans and see what the as-built shows in comparison to the approved plan. Because if there were major changes to the site from the approved plan, then it can't go.
We don't authorize COs, we just approve plans.
But we can hold it up in the short term, right?
We can hold, well, we can not approve the
Right.
changes.
Well, I mean, you can say that the chair isn't authorized to sign the plan pending resolution of this issue, I think.
That's-
But because apparently there's a plan here that I can sign. So that becomes an issue.
And the fire department had made an indeterminate statement about the turning in between the buildings. They said they were going to send an engine down, and I assume that has not been done.
Well, that comment completely, if he's complying with striping and the paving and the other things of the plan, if the fire department now can't turn their buildings, it's a little late to raise the issue.
But they
Joanne?
extended the parking spaces, they're 30 feet long now instead of the 20.
So that's the issue?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that, I'm sure, can be worked out pretty easily. I view a lot of these other things as things that would come up in a site inspection before a CO is issued, right? They didn't put the parking in the right place, they need to move this. That is nothing that you would ever consider coming back to us for. The things that we are frankly hearing from you about this are the items on the second page of your memo, the surety having addressed how we're going to handle what needs to be done, but they have to do with the fence being installed, and the fence with the gate sort of being a related issues, that parking extension striping that you were talking about, and the handicap parking space, right? Okay. So those are the issues, as far as I can tell, are before this board as to the revised conditions leading to the need for a determination as to whether they're a material and immaterial change. Are you all on board? All right. Having said that, I'm going to recognize the applicant. If you could come forward, thank you very much.
Thank you. My name is Mark McDonough. I'm the owner of
Okay.
Goffstown Self-Storage.
All right, and thank you for listening to that, because I think I need you to address what we just said are the issues for this board, okay?
I certainly will. This is the copy of the plan that was approved. It's the phasing plan that was submitted. Our folks at Meridian Land Services, our engineers, who were supposed to provide Mylars and signed copies, never did, unbeknownst to me until I came from my certificate of occupancy permit, which is what's generated this whole program. I came for the CO. I spoke to Mark Tessier. He said, well, we need to get together with engineering and do the site inspections, and that's when Joanne realized that those plans were not submitted. Immediately, I got those in hand. I will say that Sarah and Joanne have been very helpful through this whole process. I'm embarrassed that those plans were not submitted. My brothers and I do buildings all over the state, and this is highly unusual for us to be in this position. I want to speak specifically before we move on that I did reach out to Bill Connor multiple times and left messages on his voicemail at his office to have that inspection. I was already reaching out to Mark Tessier. I'd already met with Sarah on site, so I realized that he's an integral part of the CO process, so I did reach out to him multiple times. Didn't hear back, but he has subsequently been to the property. I want to speak to the parking issue. When we submitted this plan, and I don't know how well you all can see it, but if you look at this plan, you'll see that these parking spaces are clearly here on the plan, and though there is some discussion.
Sir, just to help us, could you just give us a general orientation of the site as you drive in from
Sure,
the back road?
I'd be happy to.
And and just for the general layout, point out in general, where the fence is, where the parking is, and where the handicap spot is, because those are the things we're going to be talking about.
This piece matches up here
Okay.
and ties in. So you come in off of Tower Lane and you take a right-hand turn behind the new convenience store, Dunkin' Donuts, and you come around the back. This site cannot be seen from the road. It's tucked back way away. So you come in through this access road and there's a gate at this location, automated, working fine. Bill's notes indicated that it's not working, but it works. I just went there tonight. The gate's operational. There is a fence that runs all the way down this side of the property and ends at the rain garden, and it comes all the way around this side of the property. It's shown on the as-built until the terrain is so high, and we have heavily wooded areas here and all wetlands on this side of the property. We were not aware of that when we started construction until they cleared the lot, opened it up, and we realized, well, there's no way to get into the back of this building. So during construction, we made an on-premise, on-site decision to eliminate that fence.
And on the plan, where is the fence shown
The
that
fence-
you
the
did
fence-
not build?
The fence runs along this rain garden where the
Okay.
wetlands are and wraps around down low on this side of the property as well. So
All right, so the decision was made
the
not to build a fence?
decision was made, we have
Okay.
multiple other locations with storage that do not have fencing because the units are locked. You know, I spoke to the police department who's on the technical review committee, Eric, about it. I sent you all a letter. You know, they'd like to have the fence, but he's not mandating it. I feel like it's a big expense that unfortunately we feel is unnecessary.
All right, but you need to understand you're talking to a board that approved a plan you gave us that had it on it. So okay, so that addresses the parking issue. I mean, the fencing issue. So I apologize, now go back to where you started, which was the parking.
So we, on this plan that was approved, all these parking spaces were on the plan. Those of you that have had an opportunity to utilize self-storage, it was clearly intended for these parking spaces to be used for storage of vehicles and/or campers and/or trailers, so that we could capitalize on this opportunity, since we can't have inside storage. So there was some discussion in the minutes, and I brought a copy of those minutes with me that talk about, we talked about perhaps using the outside area that's not been built for storage, and there was some discussion with, about using that space, and we don't intend to use that. But clearly, all through the whole process, these spaces were going to be used for storage of vehicles, RVs.
I saw that when I read the minutes, but they were actually talking about where he pointed out.
Item number 13, if the unbuilt areas are used for vehicle, mobile home storage, this storage must be kept away from on-site buildings more than 30 feet
But-
and spaced to avoid a fire incident.
The concern with the fire department is that the way he has the spaces in the front marked, they're just, like parking spaces, and they have a requirement that they have to have so much separation in between in case there were ever to go on fire. So the same requirement was placed on that back area if they were to store there before the other building was built, but there was no mention of parking them somewhere else. And now that they've been striped, they don't even have the separation. So that's,
Well, there was no requirement made in that meeting. It clearly isn't noted in the minutes, and these spaces were clearly identified to be storage spaces. So that was our intent, and that's why we built them.
Okay, it might have been your intent, sir, but I think it's obviously a question, because you went back to the minutes, Joanne went back to the minutes, and there's not a clear notation on the plan. So
Well, I asked for the copy of the minutes simply because I was being told that we couldn't use these for spaces, yet they were on the plan and they were approved to be. There's no-
Sir, I think at this point, quite honestly,
These are material changes. I've heard enough. He's going to argue with us on every point. I'm going to say that these are material changes. I don't want to hear any more tonight. I think it's pretty clear that we have a different understanding of this plan, and I don't see the point in arguing. I'm going to make a motion, these are material changes, and he's come back with an amended plan.
is there a second?
Yes.
All right, before discussion on the motion, just because I can't say that I disagree with Mr. Raymond's motion, but I would like to try to address this for staff in a way that they can deal with it when they come back. And just from a general overview, I'd like to just sort of have a consensus as to whether or not the fencing is something that you think needs to be addressed as a material change, because I would like Sarah to put together a surety bond estimate for when we might view this again. That's, and I'm not disagreeing with anything that Mr. Raymond said, but I do think that was an item brought to us by staff that they do need some direction on. Jim?
I would concur that if there's no requirement for that, unless the police have a concern about security, that's non-material. But it sounds like they do have a concern about security. And it goes back to, was it envisioned that they'd be on-site storage of vehicles? We have a difference of opinion on that, apparently, but at least it was my understanding that that site marked was not going to be. If it was not going to be used for vehicles, then we perhaps would find it's a non-material change. But to the extent it is, and the police have addressed it as a concern, I think we have to treat it as material.
All right, does anybody on the board have a different opinion as to that? I wanted the applicant to understand where we were on that issue. Okay.
Are we
Phil.
talking about the fence, or are we talking about both items?
We're talking about the fence. I think
Fence,
Jim's
that-
point is that if there's on-site parking is a material change, and based on the comments we've received to date, there were concerns raised about the need for a fence if there was outside storage of property. I think that's really what it amounted to, regardless of what it was. So that is the interpretation, and my read of that would be that if there wasn't outside storage of property, completion of the fence would not be an issue that the board would want to address, because that at least is interpreted by one member of this board as being how that plan was approved. Tim?
So the police department does not state that the fence is required, is that, am I reading that correct, Joanne?
Yeah, there's no
Correct.
requirement.
So it is a suggestion,
Yes.
and and the statement is that he assumes the owner would assume all liability for any.
Right, I mean, that's sort of
But
where
to
I-
David's point, if the project was being presented as a secure facility, then the fence should be installed. So I think it's a matter for the owner to decide what they want to provide their customers with.
Right,
in
I don't
terms of-
particularly have an issue with the fence one way or
I think the
another, whether
fence
there
could
are
be the
vehicles or
owner's
not.
decision.
It's the owner's issue in regards to renting spaces, quite frankly. Phil?
I don't have an issue with the fence. I think the issue with the fence is, that's the owner's prerogative, and that's the owner's issue, and his insurance company is going to, at some point, make a determination on that, and that's his issue
May I
to deal
speak?
with.
No.
And we're going to require the handicap space, I assume.
Well, as far as parking is concerned, I
Go ahead.
there was a handicap space that's shown on the plan, is that correct?
Yes.
Has to be put on.
I don't think a handicap space is put on a plan for long-term storage.
I think that if the handicap space was to come off, there would need to be some sort of waiver presented.
But my point is, we had handicap space on a plan. The reason why we have handicap space on a plan is for people that come in, park their vehicle, get out, use the facility, get back in and leave. It's not for a person to come in, park a vehicle for 6 months, 8 months, and leave it there. So the intent of that parking was for short-term parking to access the facility and leave. It was not intended for long-term storage.
Okay. All right, Joanne, do you think you have a pretty clear understanding of what the board is looking at and how to proceed?
So he needs to submit an amended plan.
I would say that is the consensus of the board, that you don't have the authority to address things on your own at this point. I would like some direction. I think at this point it's probably not material, but I certainly think the plan that exists for purposes of record of the file that has not been signed at some point needs to be signed, because that is part of the progression of the history of this site. Tim?
I'm thinking that if the applicant is going to withdraw the request for outside parking, then we don't need an amended plan, because you already said you have the as-built, right? And we've already conceded to the fence.
The as-built shows the outdoor parking, though.
Well, then the as-built would have to be removed from it then, if the applicant concedes the point. Then it would not require an amended plan, because we conceded the fence issue, and as long as the handicap spot goes in and there's no outside parking, it's a done deal.
All
My
right,
opinion.
Joanne, I just want to make sure you know, so you can talk to Joanne about where we are and where she thinks you need to go for us. I think that's the best way to resolve it at this point.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Yes, we didn't vote on it.
No, we didn't vote on the
Oh,
motion.
I'm
The
sorry.
material changes.
It's been moved and seconded. It's just the motion that we took. I didn't take a vote. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. Thank you. All right, the first item of notice, new business, tonight is in regards to map 4, lot 77 and 88-7-3. This is a completeness review, final subdivision review hearing for a proposal to merge lots and re-subdivide them, into 5 lots. This will create 3 additional lots from the 2 that exist today. The property is located at Lesnick and Checkerberry Lane and owned by Strategic Contracting LLC. This is zoned R1. This property was previously known as the Lally subdivision on Lesnick Road, and we previously saw an application from a purchaser of the property after that subdivision was approved. The current owner, revoked that, asked for revocation of that previous plan, which was granted, and the owner is now here tonight to proceed with a re-subdivision of the 2 lots. Joanne, why don't you take us through this?
Okay, so the layout is very similar to what you saw previously before they had their approval revoked. They're coming in for, the layout where 3 of the lots would front on Lesnick and the other 2 would front on Checkerberry Lane. They did, at one point in time, there was a shared driveway that has since gone away. They did provide for a turnaround for the fire truck between those 2 driveways to alleviate any problems in case of bad weather. The thing that I was a little confused about, and I haven't received an answer yet, is they've shown a no-cut buffer. It seems to vary in width between 40 feet and 65 feet, and that would be between their property and the Peltonins, the abutters. So I'm assuming there was some sort of an agreement made. I can only assume. But the thing that I was confused about was on lot 70, proposed lot 77-4, they also show a no residential structure buffer. And there's mention, let me just find the sheet number. Sheet number 5. There's the 4K potential septic area. But then in parentheses, it says to be removed. And in the documents, not the documents, but in the notes referring to that no residential structure, it did say something about no septics in that area. So I was just confused if when Doug gets up, if he could explain that. And then
Joanne, if I may, Joanne, if you go to page 6, or page 6, yeah. What it is there's a note there for existing house to be removed. Apparently, the to be removed wasn't taken off the print when they added the new items.
So it had nothing to do with the
Really has
septic.
nothing to do with it, from what I can see.
So that was my other question, where it points to the barn, but calls it a house.
Yeah, it
And is that barn coming down? Is that what
says
that
right there.
means?
Says existing,
Okay. So, let me just go back to my notes. from that.
I think just a terminology. So you can scratch that right out of it.
So, if I go back to my notes about this, so the no residential structure buffer would be behind that whole area that would go all the way up to the back property line of lot 77-4, as well as the no cut, which seems to possibly satisfy the abutters' concerns the last time that they were here.
All right, Joanne, before we get into any more detail on the actual plan, are there any waivers with this plan application?
I don't believe,
No, there weren't any on the application.
no waivers.
All right, and does this application have any regional impact?
No, you can find that it does not have regional impact.
All right, and is this application complete, in your opinion?
Yes, it
Thank
is.
you, Tim.
Make a motion to find this application is complete and ready for review, and that there are no regional impacts.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
It's been seconded by, we'll take Phil. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. All right, Joanne, continue.
So the new homes will be sprinklered, and there was a note from the fire department, but now I guess it doesn't pertain if the barn is being removed, that if the barn were ever turned into something more than a barn, such as an office or something of the sort, that it would need to be sprinklered, but it doesn't sound like that would apply any longer. This is close enough to public water, but far enough away that the fire department is not asking that they connect, but feels comfortable having just the fire suppression systems in the homes. So that's a recommendation from fire to the planning board. The plans were reviewed, and we had enough time to do a second review, so many of the comments that were previously listed have been addressed,
Okay.
and that is why we were showing the final conditions if you were to go ahead. I do have 2 additional that I would like to add at the end. I could just mention it now, that the sprinklers must be permanently recorded at the Registry of Deeds for all of the lots. And then I'll take the other one off about the barn, but that was the only other thing that was missing. The existing house would remain as is. The fire suppression would not apply to that particular house since it's existing.
Joanne, when you're referring to the comments, are those included in the packet that we received in the mail?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you just said the barn. The barn wasn't,
The barn that's next to the proposed single-family dwelling, there's just a barn standing there.
right.
There's a note that says existing house to be removed.
Oh,
and points
okay.
to the barn. So Doug should clarify that, but I'm assuming that barn is being eliminated.
All right. I just was confused as to the way you said it. I was looking for a reference to the barn in your comments. That's why I was, Tim.
So on your staff recommendations on page 7, Joanne, the first one is the impact fee shall be paid prior to the issuance of the certificate of occupancy. We've never seen that before. Has there
I
been a
know,
problem?
and No, it's not a problem at all. It's just that the state statute says that the planning board assesses the impact fees, and I've noticed that it's not
Okay.
on any of your approvals, and I
I mean,
think
we
it
do
should
it,
be.
but, okay.
Thank you.
All right, does anybody have any questions on this? Just for purposes of overview, what we have before us is a plan that consolidates 2 lots, and there would be 3 lots off of Lesnick Road with access from Lesnick Road, and then there would be 2 lots off of Chuckaberry with separate drives as compared to a long shared driveway on the plan that has been revoked. So there do appear to be some similarities. It is 5 lots. Tim?
Do we have to take action on the consolidation prior to the proposed subdivision being presented, or do they go hand in hand?
It should be a separate vote.
I was wondering about that.
Okay. Any other questions from the board before we hear from the applicant? Seeing none, come on down, gentlemen.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Doug McGuire with the Dubay Group. Joanne took a...
Doug, why don't you introduce the guy to your right, too, while you're at it?
I'm Robert Starris, owner of Strategic Contracting LLC.
Yeah, where'd you...
And the
You
property?
snuck up here. All right.
You motioned me to get up here.
He was afraid to come up alone. He made you come, I saw.
You did.
Come on. So Joanne took a bit of the thunder out of my presentation tonight, because that was a very good synopsis as to where we're at. Obviously, we're coming in to consolidate and re-subdivide into 5 lots. The applicant has been working with Mr. Peltonen, the next-door neighbor, and they've had some very productive conversation. The applicant wanted to see what he could do to address some of the concerns. And so I'll clarify some of the items just as to
Thank
what we were proposing to do regarding the, some voluntary restrictions on the, some of the proposed lots. So what we have here is, Mr. Peltonen lives right here, directly adjacent to the existing home. And so we're proposing a...
Doug, you might acknowledge Mrs. Pelton.
You might have to back up a little bit so they can see too.
Yes, I apologize. Mrs. Pelton has also been part of these conversations. Thank you for that. So what we have is we have a no disturb, no cut buffer along the side of this property. This extends all the way back across the 2 proposed rear properties as well. The other concern that was raised was basically it was maintaining the character of the neighborhood and not having, too many units, too many homes. That was the concern. So in lieu of eliminating lots, the compromise was that a lot would not be placed farther back, which would be, giving the appearance of more density. It would be held closer to the front of the road. So that's why we have a no structure buffer.
It's actually no residential structure.
No residential structure.
Right, so if someone wanted to put up a detached 2-car garage or something of that sort, as long as there's no living structure, that's what we agreed on, right?
Correct.
Yes.
So, thank you. So, so that's where we're at, and so the, obviously a septic system or something like that could still be placed in that buffer area. A septic system cannot be placed in the no-cut buffer because that would require cutting of vegetation. So, 2 slightly different restrictions on these properties. So, and I think the board kind of worked their way out with regards to the barn. That's correct. If I had something that said not to be removed, I didn't see where that was. But basically, we're showing that we're eliminating the barn and putting in a new proposed home outside of that no structure setback.
Just says that, it points to the barn and says house.
Page 5, there's a note on page 5, to be removed.
No,
is
it
left.
actually says to be removed.
Yeah, next to the septic.
No, it's,
Next to the
Says it-
septic system on page 5, you'll see to be removed, it never got taken off.
Well, that is the intent, because the intent of the existing barn would be removed because the new proposed house is like on top of it, inside of it type of situation.
But on sheet 5, it shows it next to the
It
septic.
didn't come off of sheet
Oh, okay.
5, it didn't get removed.
no, it needs to be moved.
Needs an arrow from the words to the barn.
Can that be corrected, Doug? To say,
Are we saying this right here, the to be removed?
Yeah.
That is actually, okay, now we're on the same page. That's actually not regarding the barn, that is referring to the existing septic system, which is currently being utilized by the existing house. That would now be on the proposed abutting lot. So that septic system has to be removed as well.
wrong.
And so it was put on this plan because we're showing our 2 different 4K areas, which are septic related. So that's why so it is to be removed. It should also be on the removals plan as well, but I think,
Wait, my computer.
this one, right here.
so that's what it is. We're
No, I'm
proposing
on
to
sheet
remove
5.
the barn, and we're also proposing to remove the existing septic system.
Which is which is where the new system is proposed to be installed? Page, you go to page 6.
Yeah, here.
Looks like the septic for the house is gonna be
Yes.
where the other one goes away.
Yes, I mean, in
Okay.
a similar location, yes.
So your 4K area is pretty much the same spot.
Correct, yeah.
Okay.
We just had to acknowledge that obviously we weren't planning on keeping an off-lot septic system. A new septic system will be installed for the existing.
And also, can we revisit the barn? Because I haven't really checked it out structurally. If it's okay structurally, and I can just add a house to it and re-sprinkle it, like the fire.
Only if- You only need to well, that should be a note, but you only need to re-sprinkler it if you use it for something other than just a barn.
Correct. Oh, okay.
Like,
So like if I do attach it to the house somehow, and I haven't had an architect kind of look at that, does it really need to be removed, would be my question.
no.
No.
Okay, so if there's a note on there that it has to be removed, can we just eliminate that note?
And I think the intent of our prototypical lot plan is just really more for the benefit of the board to see the buildability of the lots and what, at this point, is being intended to be created. Obviously, the exact shape of these homes may modify depending on interested party or who Mr. Steris is going to ultimately build the house for.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Tim.
So if you
But
do
keep it, you should
intend,
have that note.
if you do intend to possibly use the barn, you need to change that plan and remove that existing house to be removed. No, otherwise it's on the signed plan, and then it's a problem for you. So if you're gonna do
Does it
that,
say
you've
that?
got to
Well, it
remove
says
that
on the
note.
on the prototypical.
Okay.
Even if it's sort of conceptual in nature, it's written on there, it needs to come off if you want to
Well,
do
or
so.
you just add something to the to be removed that clarifies what you're talking about.
Okay.
Page 6 of 11 shows, from your information, shows
Wait a minute, she's-
the barn and the
Barbara, we haven't
dwelling
recognized
might
Kathy to speak.
clarify what the board's
Kathy,
understanding.
thank you, public comment is not yet.
Just help.
Kathy. That's why when you're school children, you pass secret notes to your friends in class. Michael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We can keep calling it a barn, but my understanding is has a driveway, it is a garage door, and that there's a second floor to it, a finished space. Is that accurate?
It's not finished.
It's not finished?
No. No, it's all, it's kind of like a trap door going up there, and it's just an attic.
And I think
And the driveway is really just like a path.
my intention of doing the prototypical lot grading plan is just that word, prototypical. So, I mean, if there's additional notes I could add potentially that kind of makes this a little bit less binding, because the intent was not to be binding to this exact lot, or house shape as well. Being that this is just a subdivision, technically, this is meant really more for the benefit of the staff and the board to just see what we're going for here. So I could kind of clarify that with some notes.
Michael?
Thank you. Just a quick follow-up. How do we intend to enforce this no-cut buffer in this no residential building?
That's a good question. It will be a signed agreement between the abutter and the applicant, and obviously it will be a deed restriction on the deeds of these properties moving forward. So, it would be referring to this plan. This plan will be recorded with these restrictions on it. The deeds will refer to that, so I think that should cover that.
So my first question for you would be, how are you going to assure us that when this house is sold up in the upper corner there, you sell that house and the homeowner comes in and just cuts trees down, how are you going to assure that this doesn't happen? Are you going to placard the trees, or what are we going to do to make the assurance for us?
Well, I mean,
We certainly could put no-cut buffer signs.
yeah,
We've done that in the past with wetlands and such. But it's just that it seems like it's a great plan, it shows how it's all going to happen, and then 5 years from now, when the house is sold, we see the GIS picture and somebody cut all the trees to the property line and put a lawn out there.
Well, I think there would be some potential legal enforceability with, at least on the behalf of the abutter, to pursue that if he, I mean, obviously, if somebody's going to cut the trees and do what they want, I mean, we can't really prohibit that, but the intent is,
Excuse
Then
me.
how can you make the assurance that it's a no-cut buffer to me?
I guess we can't.
We-
It's what would
Yeah, I
be,
mean, I'm not, we can't, but, Jim?
Well, I'd suggest that there's both a private remedy by the Peltmans or their successors, and also that I don't think we would exercise as a town, because we might not care, but there's a right of the town to enforce with a attorney's fees recovery provision that gives it some teeth. It's no guarantee.
Thank you for that comment, but we have never talked about doing that on any other private development.
Well, that's the question. Do we mean? Is this
Well,
just
if we
a
do that,
private-
we need to have a policy
Is
discussion.
this just a private benefit, or is this a?
which I said.
I think there needs to be the
You did
placard
at Bog
thing.
Road, though. You made them
What?
placard the trees behind.
No, placarding the trees
Right.
we've done. I think we did it off of Addison for property also.
But the question I'm raising is, if it's only a private matter, then you're right, it's a private remedy. If we're treating this as material for us, other than that, it'd be a public remedy. I'm not sure that there is. I think this is a private matter.
No, I think there needs to be a provision for the posting of placards on the trees, and I forget how many feet away we do them, but there's a provision that there's a standard.
Typically every
for-
50
Yeah, I think
feet?
that's what it has been in the
That'd be
past.
fine.
Yeah, we can add that.
Okay, so add a note to the plan that you're going to do that. Joanne?
Can I just get clarification on the no residential structure buffer? Can trees be taken down in
Yes.
that area? You just can't build a residential?
That's
structure.
correct, yes.
Will the agreement between the two parties be part of the approval of the plan and be recorded with the plan? Or is that, we're leaving that up to them as well?
I'm understanding that we're going to do placards and there are going to be deed restrictions as to this no-cut area.
Okay.
So that was my understanding.
That's what I heard.
Jim?
Well, it goes back to, enforceability, who enforces.
Right, then welcome. Yeah.
I hate to give up a remedy if we might want it.
Michael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The no residential structure, is that any structure that can be built in a residential zone, or is that a dwelling unit? I'm not sure what that definition of residential structure is in this context.
I can tell you that the agreement that's being agreed upon and drafted that would be referring to this plan, I mean, this plan is obviously just the visual aid to assist with the deed restrictions, but the agreement is going to specifically say no residential, basically a residential structure in that you can't,
Yeah, the
it's not
house
the
that-
living space.
The house that I'm
essentially.
going to build and sell needs to be in front of this line.
If they were putting a shed or something else of that nature, which is not a part of the primary living structure, that would not.
So barns, detached garages.
Those would be acceptable, is the way I understand the agreement's been
Yes,
written.
as long as it's not, you're not going to put accessory dwelling above it.
So do I understand that, based on Michael's concern, that perhaps a residence is not the proper term? We should refer to it as a dwelling, since that is the term that's
Dwelling
defined
unit.
in our zoning ordinance as compared to residence?
So a no dwelling unit setback or
Well, if I look in our
or
zoning
buffer?
ordinance, we don't have a definition for residence, but we do for dwelling, which is a building designed or used as a place of residence. And
I
that
think,
would appear
yeah,
to be
we can
what
change
we're
that.
doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further comments or questions from the board members for this applicant before I open the public hearing? Seeing none, thank you, gentlemen. At this time, I'm opening this to public comment. Kathy, sorry I shut you down before. You have something to say? Come on down.
Okay. I was just trying to be helpful.
No, I know you
Yeah.
were, but I wasn't
Yeah.
paying attention to what was going on, and I
Okay.
couldn't.
No, I
happen.
apologize to the board and to the applicant, so. You were talking about the footprint of the barn and the footprint of the house, and it wasn't shown on the main floor plan, but it was shown on a subsequent plan where both of those footprints were on, so it made it easier to visualize where those were. So I just thought that might help in your discussion.
Oh, okay.
I didn't have a point about that. I was just trying to tell you that it was on 6 of 11, and you could see it easier there, where the footprint of both is there. So, moving on. My concern, as you know, my name is Catherine Prescaza. I live on Evergreen Drive, and we're concerned about water that comes down off of the mountain. And I'd like to pass around some pictures that are that illustrate what happens on the Lally property and across from Lesnick Road when those waters come down through that property. It really is significant. It's not like that today, this week, this year, but in very recent past, these are the amount of flow that truly comes down into the Lally property that we're talking about. So the applicant has put together a plan where he has what they call plunge pools on the back between the two lots. If you look on sheet 7, yep, right there. So Lesnick Road is along here, Checkberry Lane comes along this way, and on this lot 77.1, there's the drainage line comes down here, and then there's a head wall and a plunge pool that is, there are no details on your construction document sets, your site plan. It doesn't delineate whether it's riprap or gravel or grass swale. It doesn't give any definition to what it is. It gives a depth in terms of grade and contour lines, but it doesn't give a material quantification of how that is to be built. So when this water that you just saw those pictures come screaming down the mountain, it's going to end up in this plunge pool. And if it's grass, I fear that that water will come down and just the turbidity will just chew it up, and then under that driveway comes a 20, on one of them is 23-foot long, 24-inch diameter pipe that comes out and comes to the other end in a concrete head wall, it appears. And then short distance, hard to tell on this drawing without a scale here, but 30 feet, 50 feet, I'm not quite sure. Doug could tell us. But there's another plunge pool here.
1 inch is 30 feet.
So about 30, 35 feet maybe. There's another plunge pool that, again, doesn't have any definition of what it is. Is it grass? Is it gravel? Is it riprap? Is it bigger stones? We don't know. And then all of these driveways have a trench, a gravel trench, the whole length of the driveway that catches all that water that's coming down the mountain, catches it and brings it into these drains, and then these drains subsequently come back down and drain to the back of the, there's a channel that comes along the whole road down Evergreen Drive and ultimately into my backyard. So that's why I'm concerned about it. And I would like to ask the board to consider a continuance so that the applicant can put together some information about what this plunge pool really is going to be, so that we can have some information about what that is, and perhaps we can have our engineer look at it and assess whether that will be adequate to absorb the water, retain the water, slow down the water. We know what it's supposed to do, but really it's just verbal descriptive terms. We don't have anything in writing, and we don't have anything in definition of what the contractor is to build. There's no defined scope of what that is. So I would ask for that to be defined, documented, and allow abutters to review that. And if it comes to be that this is not big enough or not wide enough or not deep enough to slow that down, it could be materially different in whether you can allow what I call this pinch point here between these two sites. This is, you have a 150-foot frontage requirement. You're just about at 150 feet each one, maybe off by 5. But if this pinch point gets too tight, maybe it changes the arrangement of that plunge pool or the driveways or what have you. So in the absence of defining what this really is, it puts these two lots in question of if they will really work, as it's hoped, not designed, because it hasn't been designed. So I think that it's premature to give it an approval, but I'm hopeful that the single-family homes will be able to be approved, but we just need a little bit more time for the applicant to define what that solution will be. So I'm asking for that to be continued, for him to do that, and so that we, as abutters, have time to review that.
Thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other member of the public who would like to make a comment at this time? Mr. Peltonen, please come forward and state your name for the record.
Okay. Can you pass the pictures around?
Good evening,
Thank
ladies
you.
and gentlemen. My name is John Peltonen, and my wife Kathy and I own the property that is immediately east of the former Lally property, and we have had a few discussions, quite a few discussions with Mr. Staros about what he wanted to do out here, and once the board determined that he could revoke the, ask for and receive revocation of the past approval and start over again, we've talked with him about how this might be done, and we concur in the plan that has been presented. We appreciate the concerns that the board has expressed about the restriction zones. They will be restrictions that run with the land, and the agreement that we have been working on, it's not quite signed yet, waiting for the board's decision, I guess. But the agreement would provide that that the abutter can enforce these restrictions. They're for the benefit of the abutters as well. And if there's a way for the town to be able to participate in the enforcement, that would be a great help, because as we know, there's a very legitimate concern about a buyer coming in and a couple of years later, just, my wife has expressed this concern over and over again, that I'm sure Rob isn't going to do it. He's told me that. And in fact, on pages 5, 6, and 7, with the leach fields are set forth, there seems to be some confusion there, and page 5, I think, would suggest that the leach fields would have to be built in such a way that that there is an encroachment of the no-cut zone. I asked Rob about that, and he said absolutely not. They're not going to disturb the no-cut zones, and I trust him on that. But you never know what a new owner might do a few years down the road. And I'm a little bit older now than I was, and don't have quite the same energy, time, or money that I may have had in the past, and it would help if the town, maybe just if only as a salve to the idea that maybe there isn't finality in planning board decisions, as we've since learned. So maybe it's just a salve for that maybe the town can assist a homeowner and an abutter in enforcing some of these restrictions, because they are important. They're important to the way that the area develops, and the way it looks, the way it handles the water, the way it handles livestock, not livestock, but wild animals that come through there all the time. I mean, that whole ecosystem is important to all of us, and really it would help, I think, if the board could find a way to have the town at least be able to assist. And as Mr. Raymond pointed out, that includes being able to recover attorney's fees, which can be troublesome in these matters. But we've spent a long time with Mr. Staros. He's been very, very helpful and cooperative, and wants to make sure that Kathy and I are content, and we are content with what he's proposed. We've expressed concerns, as Kathy Piscazza has, with respect to the drainage, because as we know, there's an awful lot of water that comes down off the hill and comes through the Lally property. He has assured me, Mr. Staros has assured me, that they're addressing that water, and I know that the town is concerned about it as well. And we'll take a close look at whether that can be done properly to allow these homes to be built. But we're supporting the plan now, having had all these discussions and having had the rulings that the board found necessary under the law to make. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public here who would like to make a comment in regards to this plan? At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing, subject to further board action. Before we hear from the board, Sarah? Sarah, you want to come on down here for a second on this plan?
I was going to ask if Sarah.
Oh, okay. Just for purposes of the record, Sarah, as you come down, I know that you all had made certain comments in regards to this plan that were submitted to the applicant. The applicant answered those comments in a letter dated March 6th. It appears to me, based on the public comments, that the things that I'm particularly interested in hearing from you on are the comments and your responses set forth on page 4 of the applicant's response letter, which relate to the drainage issues off of the 2 lots that would be accessed off of Checkaberry. If you look at sheet 7 of 11, you can see the plunge pool that one of the persons speaking here tonight during the public hearing spoke to. You can also see the stone recharge trench that you addressed in your comment, and there are 2 stone recharge trenches at the driveway area. The plunge pool was not addressed, and only one of the stone recharge trenches was addressed. And I note that the applicant's response that these measurements are approximate, that the trench you were talking about was 3 feet deep in all areas, and that there is approximately 0.24 feet height of available storage left in a storm. And I need to tell you, living on the side of the Uncanunics on a different side, I wouldn't bet anything on having 0.24 feet for water storage coming off that mountain. So, drainage.
Okay.
Was there?
Is there a
what's your
concern?
question?
What is your issue with the recharge trench as you identified in your comments and their response?
In my comments, I mentioned a concern that we talked about at a previous meeting about how if water's coming down and the trench is at a slope, that it's not just going to sit there because it's even depth. It's going to probably follow the slope down and it would overflow near the street. And their response is they're going to install check dams to prevent it from all going down and collecting near the road. And then their response about their modeling is that it takes an average and it's hard, I believe it's hard to model it at the diagonal, like over a slope.
Okay.
I mean, I looked at their drainage report. I even went over it with Megan because I know this is a very sensitive area. We checked the numbers and the drainage report works. They're actually reducing the runoff volume.
Okay. Can you explain for me again what a plunge pool is?
I interpreted it as, I feel like that's a really bad name. I interpret it as this is a grass swale, basically, a little indentation, and it's grass with specific gravels designed under it to allow for infiltration. The plunge pool name, I think, is more so that you know what he's talking about in the drainage report.
Okay.
But I guess I probably should have asked for more clarification of that, but I assumed it was just grass.
All right. And are there any other concerns that you have in regards to this site plan? Not that those are a concern, apparently, but did you have anything that you didn't feel was adequately addressed by the applicant?
Did you guys get my revised comments after the letter?
Yeah, they're right here.
So I had a list of a decent amount of comments. I sent it to the applicant. They addressed it in this memo, and then any remaining comments were included
In the
separately.
in the report that you received, those are her revised comments.
What's the date? March, the one I'm looking at is March 6th.
March 7th. But I can read them because there are only 3.
Okay. Why don't you read them?
And the applicant provided a response to 2 of them. I just thought I would keep them in. That DPW's opinion is that the 4K area shown on lot 4-77-3 is not realistic for construction, but it is that type of plan is kind of, you just have to fit everything in the square. It doesn't mean you have to build
That's what
things
you're
like
gonna
that. And then the other was that the well locations for lots 77-3 and 77-4 might be challenging to construct as shown, but given that the applicant owns the entire area and could access it from 77-1, that makes construction more feasible. That was the applicant's response, and we were pretty satisfied with that. The final comment I had was with the fire truck turnaround. Up the driveways from the plunge pools, you can see there's a dash line that shows a gravel fire truck turnaround. And I thought this should be reviewed by the fire department, how they feel about that. And that some kind of agreement probably needs to be in place, whether it's an easement for the fire department to ensure they're always going to have access, and also a maintenance agreement so that one neighbor doesn't plow their snow for their half and prevent access for the fire department, that some kind of maintenance agreement would have to be in place.
Not sure where you're talking about.
Perhaps page 7.
Right here.
Oh, I
That's the
see.
turning
Oh,
area for a
okay,
fire engine.
Okay.
It's clever.
All right, Tim?
Sarah, on 77-1 and 77-2, those driveways are NFPA
Yes.
required standards?
Yep.
Okay.
And a ton of my comments that were initially submitted were addressed in notes that they already have on the plan. So they have a note on the plan about a drainage maintenance agreement for the plunge pools, a note about the NFPA standards for the driveways, a note about pre-construction meeting. Pretty much all my comments have been addressed in notes that are on the plan.
So what I'm going to ask you about is the NFPA requirement is minimum driveway width shall be 16 feet, including the shoulders. They show the driveway at 12 feet on both of those driveways on the plan. So that needs to be adjusted to meet the NFPA requirement standard.
Okay.
So that's a note that needs to be adjusted.
All right, any other questions from board members? All right, I'm going to ask the applicant, Doug, if you want to come up. Sarah, you can stay there. I would like a definition of a plunge pool.
So,
Well, I want to hear what they have.
when I think of a plunge pool, what I'm going for is energy dissipation. So, it's a plunge pool because you're basically digging it down to allow the flow to go from a concentrated situation to a larger pool area. So, if a couple things I'd like to just clarify about this. So, number one, these lots under the previous application were also proposed. There were, as we know, there was lots in this area as well, and there were drainage mitigations that needed to be completed as part of that. Their proposal had several rain gardens in the front yard and also the backyards of these units, and so they were taking, an existing or a proposed home, and they were saying, okay, well, we're gonna dissipate this in a rain garden downstream. Now, from an enforceability and maintenance issue, rain gardens, in my opinion, would be very difficult on a site like this, particularly in a private residence, because someone wants to decide to put their shed or their pool, and all of a sudden the rain garden just kind of gets smoothed out. What we tried to do is come up with something that was, knowing the concerns of drainage and knowing that there's possibilities we have to be realistic about, we tried to create something that would be more maintainable and easier to construct and less likely to be altered. The The trench along the downhill side of the driveways is a perfect example of that, because this can look like an aesthetic feature. It can be just a stone edge. There's really no serious maintenance that needs to be done as part of that. And so it's very unlikely that that would be removed, because the stone it's all happening in the subsurface area below. So you're not seeing an eyesore or having something that you want to fill in. With regards to the plunge pools, what we were trying to do is, this is an existing cut channel through here, and we're maintaining that flow pattern exactly as it was. And so the plunge pools are just an energy dissipator to essentially, in all honesty, address some of the abutters' concerns that were brought up, in that, you know, there could be some scouring, there could be some high velocities, large storm events that are coming through, the rare Mother's Day flood type situations. These would assist with that. They give more room to allow the runoff to spread out, and they're going to slow that flow down and prevent potential additional scour. We designed these. I've never designed a residential driveway culvert at 24 inches in my career, but I'm doing it here because we want to make sure that we're not creating any type of catastrophic failure. These were designed to exceed the 100-year design storm. So, you know, we have been thinking about that. If we don't like the word or term plunge pool, I can rename it to something different. It's an energy dissipator. I would guess, because this isn't a riprap line channel and that we're going from a concentrated situation to a less concentrated situation as far as velocities would go, I don't think it would be necessary that those be riprap lined. But if that's something, Sarah, that, you know, you have concern with after hearing testimony, I'm not opposed to adding some riprap at the entrances, you know, to prevent potential scour. But obviously the goal will be, in construction of these, is that these would be vegetated and the vegetation would be established and growing. I just think it would be a little bit more, it would really be aesthetic reasons. So I think it would be a little bit more attractive to have it be a vegetated swale, as you said, as opposed to like this.
Aha! That's what a plunge pool is, a vegetated swale.
Like,
No, it's
if you
not.
were doing a cut section, what is the, how do you do it?
All right, okay, stop, because I'm still waiting for an explanation of what it is. I don't
Energy
know if anybody
dissipator.
here- An energy dissipator is not an explanation for something on a plan.
It's like a
Tim,
bowl.
what is a plunge
So
pool?
in my prior experience, a plunge pool is exactly what Doug said. It's an energy dissipator, except that it's at the outfall of a culvert pipe, because the water picks up speed when it goes through the culvert pipe, and when it exits the culvert pipe, it will charge out and scour. That's where a plunge pool is installed. It's stone-lined. The water comes out of the pipe, it goes into the plunge pool, it circles, it takes the energy out of the water, and it spills over the erosion stone and goes back into the channel at channel speed
And
again.
Because up until then, I thought the only energy dissipator around here was this meeting as to me. So
Yes.
I wanted
It's
a
correct. I
physical
concur with his
description
statement.
of something, and now I have it. All right.
It
Jim.
also provides some additional storage,
Yeah.
No, I
of which
understand
we're
by
not,
definition.
we're not accounting for in the model.
All right, Jim.
Well, I don't want to learn too much about plunge pools, but I've heard on the left that the stone lined and on the right that the grass lined. So I guess it'd be useful when you give us the detail, you specify what it is so we can tell if it's built.
I think what I would suggest, especially hearing some of the abutter concerns, that we line the entrances to these areas with stone. And so we will add that to the plan.
I guess I'm going to suggest then that the plunge pool be designed to the satisfaction of the DPW, so we don't have to know any more about it.
Yeah.
That's what the swale was though, right?
Thank you.
Yeah, it really was, but.
All right, what about the issue of the width of the driveway?
So I can speak to that just quickly. So the intention was to fully meet the NFPA requirement. We got a little creative in that we were also trying to minimize pavement as well, but we have the span. So if you look at the same sheet, what is that, sheet 7? Where am I? So, and I should also note that this is exactly how the previous application.
Hey, the previous application doesn't exist, and your client took it away, so
I
we're
understand
looking
that.
at this-
I'm just trying to say, as far as how this was reviewed by the fire department previously.
Okay, the
What
fire
we,
department.
what we're proposing is a 12-foot drive with 2-foot gravel shoulders on each side of that 12-foot drive to give a 16-foot or not paved, but a 16-foot drivable surface, and we have an additional requirement that for an additional 2 feet outside of that is completely clear of vegetation, so no planting of street trees or anything like that, to give you that full 20-foot minimum clearance width. That was the intention of how to meet the NFPA requirement. So essentially, you have a 16-foot travel surface and a 20-foot clear span.
So then your
So the
stone
stone
line ditches will be installed on the outside of the 2-foot gravel shoulder.
Well,
Are they drivable?
Or they-
those are drivable because, in fact, they're 2.5 feet of crushed stone. So,
It says in our regulations, it does not mention crushed stone. It states pavement, crushed gravel, and nit pack or other suitable materials for supporting the loads of fire trucks. So I would suggest that you put your 2-foot gravel shoulders on both sides and put your stone drain on the outside of the
Okay.
gravel shoulder, and that would support the load of the fire engine and meet the spirit and intent of the regulation.
Joanne?
Well, the fire department, when they commented on this, there's a section under site access, and basically, they're giving some guidance, but they want final approval of.
Right, but given the drainage issues, this isn't just an issue of a surface for the fire truck, because their drainage is part of the access. It needs to be because of the drainage issues on the slope. Doug?
well, and Madam Chair, I guess I would ask, I don't disagree with your comment. I think from an aesthetic-only standpoint, it would be nice to have this drip edge be along the driveway edge physically, as opposed to having a gravel panel and then that, because it's going to then kind of be floating. What I would ask is if we could just get concurrence from the fire department, whether they would be comfortable with using the drainage feature, which, I can show him what that is and how compacted that is. I mean, you can't really, stone is by definition 100% compacted as you place it. So
3/8 stone. Pea stone only is 100% compacted when placed. 3/4 stone is not. That doesn't follow that, and above it. I'll say that for a defense.
okay, well, I'm not going to disagree with you.
Good idea.
But what I would say is, I think we should just ask the fire department if they're comfortable utilizing that edge.
Get their opinion.
If they're not, then we will push it out.
Another thing with having the gravel shoulder between the paved surface and the trench is that likely it's going to wash some of the gravel into the trench, which will make it not function as well and create a maintenance problem for
Your engineers figure it out.
Well, it's going to create a maintenance problem for the resident.
Still got to have the load-bearing surface.
I think as long as the fire department is comfortable, then
You
I
get
would like
there
to keep
okay,
it.
and
Okay, that's fair.
Okay. Other questions or? For Doug? Sarah? Anybody? All right.
Yes, I'd like
David.
to address the comment made earlier about the no-cut buffer zone, and if there's a responsibility for the town to do such enforcement.
Well, I think that's sort of a discussion for us in regards to
Yes.
where we are in the plan right
Okay.
now. I'm trying to figure out if there are other people who have questions, and I just suspended the public comment. Is there any other member of the public that would like to make a comment at this time based on the discussions we've had? All right, thank you, Sarah. Kathy, why don't you come on down?
This is a question, just a clarification I'm not really clear on. The definition of the plunge pool was the pipe comes out and reduces the turbidity on the bottom side of the driveway.
That's what I was taught.
Well, on the plan, they're on the uphill side, on both sides. So perhaps that it would be helpful for the plan and the DPW, I think, to see it in writing so that we can look at it and see really where they are, how big they are, and if they're located uphill, downhill. We just want to make sure that it doesn't flood our backyards. That's all.
No,
We want to make sure that when it comes down, and I can show you the pictures too, I don't think you've seen them, but when you see the volume of the water that comes down, it truly comes down like a waterfall off of that mountain. And I think you'll get a really good appreciation for the volume that comes down there. Excuse me. And So to make sure that that works appropriately, whether the riprap is on the top or the bottom, a little bit of both, it needs to be worked out in detail to make sure it works. So, thank you.
All right, Kathy, thank you.
I can add a comment to that if you'd
Yeah,
like.
Doug, why don't you go ahead? Because, I mean, drainage is, we all know drainage is an issue.
I would say that this energy dissipation feature, this deepened, widened area where the water is going to be able to collect, isn't wrong to be put on the outlet side or the inlet side. It depends on really the application. Many times I've done them on the outlet side because you get, if you have a long pipe that has a lot of flow coming through it, and then it's dumping out at a steep grade, and you're concerned about the erosion on the post side of the pipe, it would make sense to have it on that side. In this case, what I was trying to do is give an opportunity for additional storage within the driveways, so that if we have a situation where we have an extremely large storm event, and the pipe is essentially backing up a little bit because it is a concentration point, there's room for that to move out. Now, these pipes are only 1-2% grade. You're not getting a velocity buildup through this tiny culvert, so I don't think it's as warranted on the outlet side. That being said, if we're adding riprap to the plunge pool, I will add some to the outlets as well, because, to be honest, it should be on the outlet. If we're thinking it needs to be on the inlet, it should be on the outlet as well.
Okay, thank you. Tim, did you get that? Thank you. All right, thank you very much. Any further questions from the board? At this time, I'm going to close the public hearing.
You already did.
No, I sort of suspended it depending on what we were going to do, because I had no idea where we were going on this. So it is now closed. Board members, David had a comment about needing to discuss the issue. I frankly, David, don't see an issue. I see an agreement that's been reached that's going to be of record, that we're going to post.
I think I just want to reinforce that that's a private agreement, not a burden upon the town.
All right, I think that's fine for a discussion for us.
Perhaps should there be a note saying that the associated with the no-cut buffer, simply saying this no-cut buffer is a benefit to lot 4-78.
No, I don't know that I would agree with the characterization. I think a note might be appropriate, but I don't agree with.
Well, something to a note saying why it's there.
Right. Michael, did you have something? And then Jim?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Madam Chair. I have a minor concern about this connecting driveway. I haven't heard anything about any sort of maintenance agreements between the two lots. It's something that I actually haven't seen before in my brief 4+ years here on the board. So it just seems a little odd to me.
Didn't Sarah mention they were going to ask for a maintenance agreement?
Yes.
I thought.
I thought she did say Sarah did mention they were going to.
If she did, then I missed it.
Start a discussion because I wasn't sure what it needed, and it wouldn't be with DPW, so.
It would be between the owners.
And I wasn't sure if it warranted an easement for the fire department.
I suppose if there's a maintenance agreement that is intended between the two lots to address the maintenance of that connecting drive, that would address my concern.
Do you know, may I ask a question?
Sure, Jim.
What does the fire department expect to see? For example, is it a plowed driveway? Is it an all-weather driveway?
All weather, maintained.
So it's plowed.
That ought to be entertaining.
By whom?
The owner.
Well, its owner is.
See that every driveway is plowed.
Well, I guess the question becomes, as Phil is pointing out to me up here, if the purpose is to have a plowed access for the fire department, why wouldn't we require every homeowner to say that they're going to plow their driveway so the fire department can get access? I mean.
Because they don't follow the NFPA standards.
Oh, that's right, these are so long, that's why we're doing this. Okay.
And they will come with a fire engine and drive up your driveway and turn around, because they did it in my own driveway when I built my driveway. They will come.
All
I
right,
know they
so there needs to be some sort of condition about a maintenance agreement in regards to the driveway to the satisfaction of the fire department.
Well, that's going to be up to the fire department when they...
Right, that's what I'm saying, to the satisfaction of the fire department. Other outstanding concerns, thank you, Michael, for bringing that up. Joanne, are you going to make it?
I don't know.
I mean, let's get up and leave if you have to. I have a number of notes at the bottom of the conditions that are here in front of me. Tim,
Should we deal with the lot consolidation before we move on?
I think we probably should. I think that is appropriate.
So do we need a motion for that, to that effect?
Let me just look at this. Joanne, I'm looking, maybe I don't have everything. I thought I had looked at the application. Was there an application for a site plan consolidation sent?
It was part of the same application.
It was, we just don't have it?
I don't have a copy with me, but
Okay, because we just have the development review application, but there is a separate lot consolidation request somewhere?
yes.
Okay, so we would need a motion to approve the lot consolidation of,
Map 4, lot 77 and 87-3.
right. Is that a motion, Tim?
I make a motion to approve the lot consolidation request for map 4, lot 77 and lot 87-3 by Strategic Contracting, the owner.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries unanimously. We now have the application for the subdivision as to the lot that has just been created by the consolidation. We had a number of comments in regards to the possible approval. We also had a request from a member of the public in regards to continuation of this for a further study of the drainage. I have to tell you, my impression was it sounded like DPW had looked at the drainage and was generally satisfied. We're going to have a number of conditions on this plan if the board was inclined to proceed. Board members. I don't particularly want to delay this. I am thrilled to hear that I have an applicant who's worked with the abutter who appears to be happy with what has gone on. I have a number of things that need to be added to the conditions to include a change in regards to the notation on the barn/4K area, a note for placards for the no cut zone to be placed. What did we say, Tim? Do you have them?
On what? The placards, yeah, 50 feet apart.
50 feet? And a couple of other ones. Tim, did you have
I
your
have
head? Your
them
hand?
written down if you want me to
Well,
read.
Tim is,
No,
Tim had his hand up, so I
Oh,
want
sorry.
I was going to suggest that we allow the applicant's engineer to submit the plunge pool and riprap outfall design to the Public Works Department for review, at which time the Public Works Department could also make it available to concerned residents to have a look at it, and then we would be able to let that work its way through the system by way of the Planning Department prior to signing of the plan.
Okay. So are you suggesting that as a condition of approval?
That could be a condition of approval, yes.
Okay.
Please, thank you.
I have a question.
Jim?
The Conservation Commission recommended a drainage maintenance agreement. For whom? What are they talking about? What lots? Because these are individually owned
They-
lots, so what are they talking about?
They didn't get specific at,
If it's in your recommendations on number 13, what is it that?
they just wanted it to be recorded at the registry for the
What is-
private
what
drainage
is-
system on each lot.
What does that mean? What does it look like? What are we requiring?
I think they're just looking for some sort of a guarantee that it won't fail.
All right, my suspicion is the applicant was at the conservation meeting. Doug, would you have anything that might clarify that? Could you please come up?
Sure. The concern that the Conservation Commission had, obviously, the focus was on drainage,
For these
particularly
two
these two lots, because they have drainage mitigation features, namely the plunge pools and the trenches. They asked that a maintenance agreement be in place. That was actually one of Sarah's comments originally, and that's a notation on the plan. I think they were just kind of trying to hit that point home with the board. It's already something we're planning to do, is that there would be a requirement for a maintenance agreement regarding those pieces. And so if there were to be an issue from a drainage standpoint, it would give the DPW some enforceability with regards to, if they were to say, if they were to fill in the dissipation or eliminate something that is part of this plan, that would give them some.
But as far as we know, we're talking about providing a drainage maintenance agreement for lots 77, proposed lots 77.
-1 and 2.
1 and 2.
During the Concom meeting, that was the focus, was those two lots.
Just for purposes of note, I don't think on sheet 5 that there is sorry, I couldn't find it. Got it. I couldn't find your lot 2 label. All right, for lots 1 and 2.
Is there a standard form for that? Does it give a remedy to the town, like
For the
collection of
maintenance.
attorney's fees? Or?
Sarah, do you have a standard form for the maintenance agreement for drainage?
Yeah, they have a standard drainage maintenance agreement. But this would need to be provided. I'm not really sure how that would look. I mean, I think I would have to leave that as approved by DPW as to the 2 lots.
Are you talking about like the drainage maintenance agreement for the plunge pools?
No, there are 2 different
Or
things
the
that we're
maintenance
talking about.
agreement for the gravel turnaround?
No, for the drainage system, the plunge pools. And
The drainage
So
system.
Jim has clarified, he's saying yes.
We
for-
have standard language for
Right.
a drainage maintenance agreement for residents for that.
Yeah. So maintenance agreement was one of the things I had down. I also had down the fire department would need to be involved as to the driveway surface for Doug to get the final clarification on that.
I was going to say we could add that to 14.
Okay.
Just add that line to 14, as it already mentions the driveway, but you could just specify that the fire department would require construction
I
approval.
guess the lawyer in me, I'm a little concerned with having agreements just reviewed by DPW or fire department that we never see. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we're approving it. We don't know what enforcement provisions are in it. Just don't know. And do we say, not our concern, or do we want to see them before we approve them? Having seen some of the samples, I'd say, I'd like to see them sometime, because I don't think
Well,
they have the teeth in them that some people think they have.
I think I'm more concerned about the fire department issue. I think we standardly approve that the maintenance agreement will be to the satisfaction of DPW. We've done that quite a bit with the standard form. Sarah?
The drainage maintenance agreement language came from the town's attorney.
Right. So the bigger issue is the maintenance agreement as to the driveway. If we think it's necessary, I think the compliance with the standards is the owner's issues with the fire department.
As long as they're made aware of the stone trench, that's what I want to make sure the fire department's aware that there's a stone trench along the edge of the driveway, and do they find that suitable for driving on? I don't think it is, but, okay. And then you mentioned the placards at the intervals.
Board members, your druthers, there are a fair amount of outside agreements that need to occur
And did you note the drawings for the plunge pools and the outfalls to be submitted to DPW? And
I did not.
so I've got engineer to submit plunge pool and outfall drawings to Public Works, made available to your butters for viewing. And then that can be handled administratively.
If we were inclined to go forward with this, I would want this all to be subject to the approval of the town planner, because until this plan is signed, I would assume that everything would be able to be, if there were any problems with anything, we would be seeing it again.
It's up to Joanne to bring it back to us if she has a
Right.
problem with it.
I have a few others that
Okay.
I wrote. Excuse me. The fire department's requirement that the sprinkler requirement must be permanently recorded at the Registry of Deeds for all new lots.
What does that mean?
They need to have sprinkler systems in the
But
homes.
what's recorded?
Oh, there's something is put in the deed itself saying that it's a requirement per the approval.
Well, they put in the notice, the recorded notice of decision? Because what goes in a deed doesn't stay there for the next deed, so if you want to have a standard, I guess that goes back to my concern of enforceability of all these things we're making up.
Well, the maintenance agreement, we have approved for years.
I'm not gonna touch
But
that
the
one.
other thing, I mean, I guess my point is we can continue this to the next meeting if you want, because by the time all of this gets straightened out, it's not going to be done, in my opinion, by the next meeting anyways, but,
I kind of like to see these, what they're looking like.
okay.
And then there's the other one about adding the note about the barn if it were to change to another type of occupancy, such as an office or a studio or a guest house. It must be protected by a fire sprinkler system.
I'm going to request that we continue this and come back with a package that we can just approve.
We put all these
Yeah.
approvals on the list.
We're just
All
sort
right,
of
so we have a
adding
motion to continue to our next meeting.
Yeah,
Does,
it's
before we
documentation.
do, before, does anybody have, do any board members have any problems with the plan as presented in regards to the lots, the lines drawn, and the work that's been done by the applicant in regards to satisfying the requirements for showing 4K areas, buildable areas, and the drainage plan subject to the specific issues? I'm not seeing any.
My concern is just patching things on.
Okay. So if this plan was to be continued to resolve with more certainty with the various departments, the issues we have addressed, it would appear
28th.
we would be willing, I'm assuming, to, the packet goes out that very shortly, so our next meeting is
28th.
the 28th. So I guess my question for board members is,
Not going to make it.
if you're expecting to get these documents days ahead of the next, with the next packet for the 28th, I don't think it's going to happen, because those packets go out, I think, usually tomorrow, don't they?
They go out the Thursday before the meeting, so a week prior.
But I think
So
the
they-
submission deadline is generally tomorrow at 5.
The deadline for the next meeting has
Right.
already passed.
Oh, all right, so we've already passed it.
But they don't need to meet that deadline.
Okay.
Because they just need to have everything to us by the Wednesday, so it would be next Wednesday
And
prior.
include that, we can include it in our packet for the next
Because
meeting.
then the mail goes out Thursday or
Ask them.
Friday.
Ask them if they can make it.
Well, I mean, I think the problem is they're stuck dealing with everybody else's schedule on this, and the fire department can often be a challenge, and I don't even recall dealing with the fire department on this request as to how quickly they're going to get a response. I guess I'm going to ask the applicant, it would appear the board wants a continuation because of the, I won't say uncertainty, I think we understand what needs to be done, the lack of
Finality.
specific finality in regards to the issues of the fire department issues with the surface, the maintenance agreement. So do you want us to put you on the agenda for next our next meeting, which would be the 28th. Otherwise, we are into April.
Well, obviously, this project, I know that this application is the first meeting, but obviously there's some history with this project. We're hoping to move forward, so I would request that we be on the next available hearing. I'm confident that I can speak with Lieutenant Connor and track him down. I mean, if obviously I can't, then I'll have to submit a continuance request, but I'd at least like the option.
All right, but we'll put you on for the 28th, but I would like at a minimum on Wednesday, you give Joanna status to the extent of the issues that we have, and you can talk to
This coming Wednesday?
Because
Yeah,
that's when
okay.
stuff is supposed to be done.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll try to track down
Okay.
Mr. Connor.
Okay.
Thank you.
But if you give us a status on everything, that might solve some issues.
Second Jim's motion.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. This matter in regards to tax map lot 4, lot 77, and tax map 4, lot 87-3 is now continued to our next meeting of March 28th. The next item on our agenda tonight is in regards to map 29, lot 33. This is a request for relief from the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district buffer. This request is in regards to building a detached garage that will be built partially located within the outer 50 feet of the 100-foot wetland surface water conservation district buffer. The property is located at 50 Knoll Crest Road. The owners are Craig and Christina Bowden. It is zoned R1. I believe this application has been in front of Conservation. They are here tonight with their application, which you have in front of you, with information from Keyland Enterprises. Joanne, is this application complete?
Yes, it is.
Are there any regional impacts?
No, there are not, and there are no waivers.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded to accept for review the map 29, lot 33. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. Joanne, what do we have?
So the applicant is here tonight to ask for a waiver from the outer 50-foot setback to build a 26 by 32 garage on Knoll Crest. The existing house is from the 50s and is already sitting within that 50-foot setback. The garage would be adjacent but not connected. The concern that I think is it's shown on the plan as a new driveway leading to the new garage, as well as the existing driveway leading to the existing home. And they don't meet the separation requirement. So that's a whole different issue, but they're not here for that tonight. They're only here because they're
In the
within
buffer.
the buffer of the wetland.
The outer buffer.
So I noted on the comments from DPW that they also don't meet the sight distance of that driveway. So I think there may need to be some more work put into where that driveway is actually going to end up. But right now, they're just here for the impact to the 50-foot wetland setback.
Okay. Sarah, did you have an opportunity to review the wetlands report on this? There was nothing? So what are we talking about with the wetlands function and value report on your report, Joanne?
Keyland Enterprise submitted the report, and he also went to see the Conservation Commission. The commission thought that they did an excellent job in locating this proposed garage because it is in an existing lawn area. They're not really disturbing anything. The disturbance, according to the wetland report, was minimized by placing the excavated fill outside of the buffer area. and the site regrading shall be restored and stabilized with bark mulch or grass seed as necessary. And they're following the sediment control and all the standards that are required according to the state.
Okay. Is there any reason why this didn't go to DPW? Do they not normally for this process or not? I just assume anything when I have a wetlands value, anything with a calculation, I'm assuming that I see.
I thought it did go over there, but
Okay, but so it can just be subject
I
to
thought
her
it was
review.
part of the whole packet that went over, but
Okay.
I'll have to check with Patty.
Okay. I don't particularly think there are any issues with it. I'm just surprised to see that it wasn't seen by Sarah. All right, any questions from board members? You had a packet with pictures. Most of us, I think, are pretty familiar with the area, if not the specific lot. If there are no further questions for anybody from the board members, I'm going to turn this over to the applicant. Welcome.
Thank you very much. For the record, my name's Alden Boschman from Keyland. With me tonight is one of the owners, Craig Bowden. Yep. Hello. Yeah, and Craig wanted me to correct, too, for the record. Apparently, this is 20 Knollcrest?
20 Knollcrest, yeah.
Oh,
okay.
okay.
It was announced as 50.
Okay. Sorry, I misspoke.
Well, it's 20 on the application here, so.
Yep. So, real simple, like, we did look at other options. Initially, we started, Craig and his wife wanted the garage at the end of this driveway. We looked at that option, and when we went to the Conservation Commission, they really didn't like the fact that we were hugging the stream as close as we were, and it was at the Conservation's recommendations that we consider another alternative area. As far as the driveway, I did see those setbacks, Joanne, and I didn't get a chance to discuss with you, but it looked like I could easily tweak the driveway enough to make it comply. That didn't seem to be a big issue.
Okay.
And so, other than that, the only thing I saw, and I was just kind of baffled, I mean, I was submitting a plan here, for a garage layout, and we were just looking for a waiver. I didn't consider this to be a complete site plan, so we didn't do a full boundary survey at this point. And so that's typically something that we don't do for this type of project. We will have to, when the garage is built, do a certified plot plan to make sure that the foundation certainly complies with the boundaries.
Through that in the prior application, don't turn these into full site plans now.
Right.
So that was the only issues I had. Anybody that was interested, this is the type of garage that the property owners are looking to build. It's a nice, small, residential-looking garage. And
Jim.
Just for the record, I'd like Alden to tell us, I know it's in his report, that the functions, values, and conditions of the wetland resources will not be compromised as a result of the proposed project.
yes,
Can you say that so we have it in the...
Can actually say those words, Alden.
yes, it was.
Alden, to give you the, if you look at the final letters on this word in this paragraph, is what we...
Yeah, I thought I wrote it directly in the report
I'd
itself.
like you to say it so it's in the...
Yeah. Where were you looking, Jim?
It's at the top, it's a paragraph of the waiver of the 50-foot setback.
Yeah, it's basically in the review of the wetlands on site, it was determined that the functions, values, and conditions of the wetland resource will not be compromised as a result of this proposed project. You'll notice that, thank you, Jim. You'll notice that the area that the garage is going in now is an existing lawn area. You have your existing house, you have your existing tree line, and so this area here is already disturbed with lawn.
It wasn't, the words were not in your report, Alden.
Yeah, I'll look a little closer. I'll highlight them for you, Jim, but I could have sworn.
I don't think
Thank
they're
you.
in there, so just in the future.
Awesome.
Give her a quick look.
In the record record now. Thank you, very well said.
All right, I mean, I don't have an issue with this. I understand Conservation is quite happy with the placement of the house being in sort of the lawn, open area. You've done a good job to try to minimize the impact. The house is already in the outer 50 feet, so you don't, given all those representations, I don't know that I have issues. Joanne, I have a question, though. Hold on. Do we need a waiver for the issue of this isn't a full site plan?
I think you determined that at the last similar requests, that they didn't need to
Right,
abide by
okay.
those
Otherwise,
requirements.
we don't have jurisdiction over single.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. We went through this in regards to that. Okay.
Yep.
All right, any other questions before I go to DPW on this? Anything else? Okay. Joanne?
If I could just ask a question to follow up. I had put a recommendation for, as a condition, that there be a signature block, just so we have, you know, we have lots of different copies in the file. We know that it was approved, even though it's not technically, you know.
Oh, we did that on something else too, didn't we?
Yeah, just for our own purpose.
Jim?
But we don't want to show that we've approved, for example, the driveway. So we're approving only as to the outer 50 feet.
Yep.
So maybe we could have.
It has to be sort of, it can't be
Yeah.
a standard approval,
Okay,
because they'll get
okay.
thrown back at us.
Sure.
Because back to yes, we're not.
I agree. I think that there should be a piece of paper that has a signature on it with a date, but we should say plan for approval of placement of
Right, exactly what was approved.
Perfect.
a garage structure in outer 50.
Cite the regulation.
Okay. Joanne, and I guess I want Sarah down, because I have to tell you, I was surprised at your recommendation for continuance.
For this one?
Yeah.
Oh, just because there were so many comments from engineering, I thought it might be a better idea to let them address the comments and then come back. But if you're comfortable with that, that's fine.
Sarah, if you can just address your comments, because
Well,
there's a lot of numbers.
Well, what I'm hearing now is that it's not a site plan, and I apologize, I was out with my eye issue the last time there was a wetland
Right.
relief thing, so if there was a discussion about a watered-down review, I didn't get the memo, so I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry you did all this work.
Well, I think
So we reviewed it like it was a site plan, so
But-
some of these I can understand cross out.
Joanne, maybe we can have a meeting sometime to go through this list, because this is pretty much the standard list of what Sarah looks at, and maybe we can come back with a simplified form, so that when it goes over to her, she knows that this is not these things were,
And she pointed out about the driveway, which now Alden said
he can comply.
address.
He's going to
Well,
address
and
it.
I know the previous application, there was discussion about why are we commenting on the driveway? This plan isn't to approve the driveway. However, DPW has been dealing with a couple projects where applicants misunderstand the purpose of their plan and what the approval means. We've had permitting plans brought to us which they're not signed, they're not approved, and been told that we approved things. So just for clarification, I included the comments about the driveways again because I didn't want it to be misconstrued that an approval of this plan does not mean your driveways are approved.
We're not approving a plan.
Okay.
Right, we're providing relief to do something in a particular location.
Plan should
Okay.
follow. Yeah.
All right.
And you'll deal with any driveway permitting issues at Public Works regarding driveway separations and all these kinds of things. That'll be up to your department to handle that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess I didn't understand that the plan didn't get approved.
For this particular type of application,
Yeah,
I
sorry.
understand. No. I think that actually it was very helpful for you to have these down, so.
Learning curve.
We can, well, as she said, she didn't get the memo, so.
Yeah.
So we can have something different to go through. It just so happens we had another one of these applications fairly recently, so it's sort of fresh on our minds. All right, what other concerns? I'm not seeing any concerns in regards to this application for relief, given the circumstances. Does the board want to see this back again? What is the board druthers?
I'd like to make a motion.
Jim?
No, I don't know if you need public comment, but I'm going to make a motion to approve relief from the outer 50 feet, with the finding that the functions, values, and conditions of the wetland resources will not be compromised as a result of the project, based on the representations of the applicant.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you very much.
Very well said.
All right, before we do this, however, I do want to ask, because this is, people have sat here, is there any member of the public, now that Jim went ahead and made that motion, that wants to make a comment? Thank you, sir. Come on down.
Oh,
Yeah,
motion without public comment.
yeah, I know he did.
That's too bad.
I was going to say something, but.
He's probably going to support it.
May I?
Yes, you may.
My name's Charles Tentis. I reside at 28 Knollcrest Road. I'm just to the east of this property line as an abutter, and I've been a resident of that dwelling and owner of that home for 32 years. I did get the notice for this. After seeing the drawings and seeing the photograph, I totally support what Mr. Bowden is doing here with his wife, and welcome to the neighborhood, too. Glad to have you here as a new neighbor.
Well, there you go.
There you go. I think it's tastefully done. I think it's well done. I think it'll fit in with the neighborhood quite well, and as a resident living next door, I'm wholeheartily support it. Thank you.
Thank you,
Well,
Charlie.
thank you very much for coming, Charlie.
Now that we've closed, we make my motion, do we need to do it again, or we
If you want to be procedurally correct, you should.
confirm the motion?
Yeah, affirm the previous motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? I have to admit, I let that sneak by. I had a suspicion what our member of the public might say. So, thank you very much for
Thank you
coming
very much.
tonight. All right, the next item we have tonight is in regards to map 9, lot 60-1. This is a waiver request from the development regs in regards to section 8 driveways and 7 residential driveways not exceeding 22 feet in width, including the flare radii of 5 feet. A waiver is requested to allow for a driveway that currently exceeds the driveway width requirements. The applicant owners are Donald and Tammy DeSaliers. We're located at 171 Montalona Road and Fieldstone Drive. This is zoned agricultural. This is an application before us. Joanne, before we even, I guess this is an application for a waiver, right? That's what we're dealing with. And is the application for the waiver request complete?
Yes.
And are there any regional impacts?
No, they're not.
All right.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor of accepting the application say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. All right. So before us, we are on a waiver request now for property located at the corner of Montalona and Fieldstone Drive. Joanne, I feel like I have seen this before.
So, last year, the applicant came before the board for a waiver request for it was either 40 or 42-foot wide driveway, which was denied. And it was left that the owner should try and work with the DPW department to come up with something. In the meantime, the owner filed suit against the town and appealed to the Superior Court. Took a while, but in January, the parties agreed to mediation. So they went to mediation, and they agreed that the applicant could return to this board and ask for a new waiver to go no wider than 30 feet on the same driveway. And if the board chose to approve it, the court would dismiss the case with prejudice. If the board chooses not to approve it, it would go back on the trial docket for future review by the court. So that's where we're at with this right now.
Tim?
So the town was represented at this
By the town's attorney.
by the town's attorney?
Yeah.
And it was the town's attorney that mediated to this,
Correct.
where we are now?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know how it came about, but I will tell you it's not unusual for these things to be sort of sent. I asked Joanne to get the notice of decision from our meeting, and I have it, and I will pass it around. This was in regards to this property. It was a waiver request for the same section that we're dealing tonight, and the provision was the same as we're dealing with tonight, that our rules provide that residential driveways shall not exceed 22 feet in width, including flare radii of 5 feet. And a 40-foot wide driveway is requested at that point in time, so we voted to accept the application, and then we voted to deny the waiver request, given that the applicant could accommodate the parking of vehicles and comply with the driveway requirements without the driveway exceeding the width requirements. That notice of decision issued in January on the 22nd of last year. My recollection is that there was no reconsideration of that, but that the appeal was then filed. So this waiver is being requested. Joanne, can you sort of tell us show us exactly in regards to this packet what's going on?
So maybe 5 or 6 pages in, there's actually a photograph of what they plan to do. They would like to remove, there's existing paving currently there. They would like to remove 6 feet on each end to bring the total width down to 30 feet. The development regs require no more than 22 feet for a residential driveway.
And if I look at the driveway as depicted in this photo supplied by the applicant, is that leg that I see on the left, I guess, where is this driveway entrance from? Is this from Montalona or
This is
Fieldstone?
Fieldstone.
Okay.
And then the front of the house is here facing Montalona.
So is the hammerhead that I see, is that connected to Montalona or not?
It was initially years ago, but it's since been closed.
It's closed off. So the only access is Fieldstone. Tim?
So could you go a couple more pages in your documents there, Joanne? You have a drawing that shows the lot with a large driveway with a wide entrance. And you go to the next page and it shows it with a different entrance. Can you explain why are those two official drawings are so different, or what's going on with them?
Tim, you want to hold up? You see yellow?
It's in the
there?
packet. They have the little yellow.
The yellow.
The little yellow
Okay.
things, there's 2 of them, back to back. Because if you look at his drawing of the proposed 30-foot driveway, there is a yellow line that's depicted as, in some of the other photographs, that was the approved driveway that is on the second of the 2 yellow pages. And which one was the approved driveway?
When the house was originally
Oh,
built,
there wasn't.
it was just Montalona.
Right.
There was no such thing as Fieldstone.
Didn't exist.
So he had his driveway facing Montalona.
Right.
But then he sold some property to a developer who then put in Fieldstone, and as part of that subdivision approval, I believe, the DPW wanted the driveway eliminated from Montalona because it was a busier road,
Okay.
and preferred to have the access off of Fieldstone.
Okay.
For a while, he had both opened,
Yep.
and then he was forced to close the one on Montalona. So I think that's what you're looking at is.
No, what I'm looking at the entrance to Fieldstone. One depicts a wide driveway, the first page,
Okay.
it's in yellow.
Yeah,
And it says, there's a note that says, this was obtained from DPW showing an approved driveway plan as it now sits at 40 feet wide. I'm asking, did DPW approve that?
No.
Okay. So then you go to the next page, which is obviously the subdivision plan from the Fieldstone Drive subdivision, which shows the driveway as it was to be reconstructed. Is that what I'm seeing?
yes.
So we are being asked to approve a 30-foot wide driveway cut down when there was a plan approved and signed and it didn't get built that way.
Correct.
And the reason for that is,
He was noted for violations over the past several years,
I've been here listening to this.
that the driveway was too wide.
Okay.
And that's why he came back last year asking for a waiver.
Right.
Which was then denied, which then he appealed. And now, because of the mediation with the court and the town agreed that he could come back again and ask, I'm assuming it's a compromise, I don't know, I wasn't there, but this driveway is wider, the driveway you're looking at on this plan is wider than the 30 feet. So now they're saying you can come back and ask for a new driveway width, but only up to 30 feet, not 40 or 42, which is what he requested last year.
I'm still not understanding why the driveway why we're not requiring the driveway to be constructed as it was shown on the subdivision plan back in when Fieldstone was built.
I don't have the minutes, but I suspect that was part of our discussion when we denied the waiver request the first time. Sarah, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just to pertain to the timeline, the driveway was constructed as it was shown on the plan. It was about 22 feet wide as of August 2013, I believe. And then the first violations, Jonathan O'Rourke contacted the applicant in summer of 2015 for paving wider than what was shown on the approved.
She should come up and put it on.
Come on up, come on up.
So we need this in the record, I think.
Okay.
It's in your,
But she's
Staff
testimony-
No,
testimony.
I think the point is we want you to make sure that Gail got that in the minutes.
I just read the second paragraph on here where
yeah.
Peter.
I don't
But
know
so
where
as
you're
of
pointing. I don't know where you're pointing, Sarah.
page 14, the second paragraph down.
Oh, of our packet. Where are we?
It speaks of the first violation in the summer of
All right, because
2015.
it's, Gail, it's our packet. So she just said,
Okay, this,
So
paragraph
the
here.
important point, I think she said, is originally built substantially in
In compliance.
conformance, and then
Right,
was
so the first
modified
paragraph
by
and the second
lot owner.
yeah, okay.
And
That's
then the violations started.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry, Michael.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Looking at the assented to stipulation to stay, item 5 says the application will propose a driveway redesigned to a maximum width not to exceed 30 feet. Now, that seems to be related to item 4, which discusses a width requirement of 22 feet, which is our current development regulation maximum. But that's not addressing the 5 feet of flare radii on each side. Therefore, if we permit something to be 30 feet wide with a flare radii of 5 feet on each side, ostensibly that's a 40-foot driveway.
I think your maximum is including the 5-foot flares, Michael.
Well, item 4 seems to suggest that it wouldn't be, when it references the 22-foot wide driveway.
It says, yeah, it's not including flare radius of 5 feet. So it includes the,
There might have been a difference in regards to what people thought was going to be the result as compared to what our interpretation of our ordinance would be.
I would say that as long as the 30 feet includes 5 feet of flare radii on each side, thus providing sort of a primary driveway width of 20 feet, that would address my concern, but it does see, the stipulation is silent with respect to radii themselves, the flare radii, excuse me.
Jim?
Well, when I looked through this whole packet, I looked through the documents that was supplied by by this applicant, and it's apparent that there are a lot of driveways in town that exceed our maximum allowable. And I don't know if that's evidence to allow this one, because this one was built to standards and then was widened, and I don't know about these other driveways, and I don't know if Public Works is going to have to go out and review every one of these driveways in the packet, and we're going to be visiting with all these folks. It's disconcerting that we're here.
Right. Okay. Jim?
Well, the driveway width is in the subdivision regs, and existing single-family houses aren't necessarily subject to that. So by subdividing their land, they made themselves subject to these. So that's what we're enforcing as the planning board.
Okay.
So there may be pre-existing single-family houses that don't comply, but they aren't within our jurisdiction.
Right, okay. Does the board members want any other information before we hear from the applicant who's here? Okay, I guess we're all set. Come on down, sir.
Good evening. My name is Donald Delorier. My wife Tammy Delorier and myself own the property that we are discussing this evening. Yep. Basically, what everything Joanne has said is in terms of the history of this property is correct. I did come before you last time for a waiver for a 42-foot width driveway. That was denied. My premise on that is that this house was first standing with the land that we owned, which was almost 80 acres. I built this house back in 2006 to 2007, well before the development was put in or anything, we sold the land or anything like that. At that time, I had, as you can see, a straight-out driveway onto Montalona Road with an allowable width of 25 feet at the time. I didn't have any problems being able to park a trailer, my truck, and whatnot, the same exact stuff that I still own to this day. Maybe newer, but the same type of vehicles and trailers or whatnot. Now, with this development and the driveway changed, it makes it very difficult for me to park my trailer in a truck and still allow my wife to be able to access the garage, having to make an S-turn off of the new road and into the garage. I understand that it's my, choice to have this equipment and everything, but again, I've had this stuff for 15 years now with the original house driveway as it did sit with no issues back then either. So I appealed the decision of the board last time around. We went to court. The judge forced us to go to mediation ahead of time. And after several months of wrangling the lawyer in to get mediation accomplished, we did in January. And we came to an agreement with me, Adam Jacobs, Derek Horn, and the lawyers, where, although I didn't find it 100% to my liking, mediation is giving up a little to make a, come to an agreement. And I was, with the help of my wife, we were able to agree with the lawyers and the town administrators that if I took 12 feet off the width of my driveway, they would be okay with that. And unfortunately not ideal for me, but I'd somehow make it work. And the remaining portions that I did remove would be returned back to Lumen Seed that were on the original approved subdivision plan, I guess.
Questions from board members? Sir, if you don't mind,
Yes.
we have a comment from DPW that says that there are 2 other driveways being used right now on this lot. Where would they be?
That is incorrect, but
Okay.
actually, if you travel down Fieldstone
Yeah?
further, I have an opening in the fence that allows me to get my tractor on and off the backyard to be able to plow snow on the driveway that we are discussing right now. I do not consider that a driveway. All it does is allow me to put my tractor in my backyard and then get it to my front yard. That's it. It's an opening in the fence. The other driveway is not even on my property. That, from what she is discussing, is actually town-owned property. That's the lot that I plan on buying back, and once this is settled, that I plan on buying back from the town that was taken in back taxes from the developer a few years ago. I've made an agreement with the Board of Selectmen to buy back that for a certain amount of money. However, this was one of the stipulations that we figure this driveway issue out first before proceeding with that.
Questions from board members? Michael?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In the stipulation to stay, based on the mediation, item 5 references a driveway width of not to exceed 30 feet. Do you consider that to include 5 feet radii on each side or not?
To be honest, I haven't really thought about that. That really wasn't discussed when we were in mediation. So to be honest with you, I don't have really an answer for you. I would just probably, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm going to be honest, I would probably say that the 5-foot radius, to me, if my driveway can come in parallel at 30-foot radius, I'm happy. It's just to help me accommodate backing a trailer into my driveway without running over the grass that is going to be there and creating a big mud issue, is what that is.
Well, I thank you for not lying. I think it's unfortunate that you don't have the direct access around to Montalona.
We had talked about that.
Well, Michael, that was part of a subdivision plan, and there have been continuing issues in regards to this lot, in regards to that subdivision, so we're not going to go there. So I would like to go back to the drawing or the picture that somebody referenced, page 5, the one that showed the 30 feet and your 6-foot cutaway.
Yep.
And I'm a little confused because there's like chalk lines on the driveway in between the pen lines that say approved and loam seed. So I'm not sure.
Let me explain. I came a little more prepared this time than I was last time.
Okay.
So I was able to measure out some things, and the yellow chalk line that you see is actually what is originally approved in the subdivision plan. And I went off the actual plan itself. The yellow chalk line shows that from the left side of actual tar to where the chalk line ends, that's what is approved for me. The rest of that on paper is actually supposed to be lumen seed.
Okay.
It doesn't account whatsoever. I would be able to park my trailer on the grass is what that comes down to, which wouldn't be that big of an issue. However, the way that they graded this and did everything as it is the area at the very bottom where my right side, below the green shelter there, water collects there, and it's in the right-of-way, so I've been told that I'm not allowed to touch that either. And when it was stoned up, first originally, it was lumen seed, and then I kind of built it up with a little bit of stone dust so that it was less mud. The water collect there and became an extreme mud issue that if I was to even back anything even remotely near it, it was a big trench issue, and mud came out into the road, mud came into my house. My wife was not happy, and so that being said, that's why everything became paved. And I'll be right up front with you, and that was my easiest solution to get rid of that issue.
Okay. Board members, questions? All right, at this time, thank you. You can stay right there. Is there any member of the public here who's here to talk on this application? I'm not seeing anybody, so I'm going to suspend the public hearing based on having opened it. I'm going to suspend it pending our decision on how to proceed. Jim?
Well, since these are regulations and not zoning, we do allow waiver with the strict application. These regulations would cause practical difficulty. So to the extent we were going to grant a waiver that's on page 40, section 8, subsection E, it would be on that basis. We don't just define what practical difficulty is, but it does give us some power to amend or waive our regulations. That's really the request that's being made to us.
Right.
Our prior review of this, we were looking at the requirement that is not a function of the particular use being made by the owner, but rather a general standard that we were maintaining for various reasons. This applicant, because of his equipment, has a particular need. So does that rise to the level of a practical difficulty that would justify a waiver? That's the question.
Board members? I will tell you that part of my issue is that there's no driveway permit on record for this property at any time, and this was clearly built, this house was built by the applicant's statement. At a time that certainly the driveway permit was known to be needed. I also am not sure what to do with the fact that I understand the soil and the wet issues on the driveway, which caused it to be like this. But I quite frankly see this sort of 6-foot cut on each side, and I understand what you're trying to do, and at a certain point, people try to get things put behind them and move on, but it doesn't look like much to me. And I have concerns about, frankly, if I did ask for more pavement to be pulled up, whether or not I would be making things worse by virtue of the fact that he's now filled in and gravelled, and if we pull stuff up, we're going to end up with a bigger mess. I think my preference would be to move the whole thing, if we're going to consider this, is to simply move the whole thing to the right near where his shed is and cut it all off, because I think by the applicant's own statement, he's going to end up using that 6-foot portion that he's proposing to use to rip up on the right anyways, because that was the area he filled in to use to begin with. So I get the court system and people being told to come back to see if they can work out a number in the middle. And I just would say if I was inclined to say okay to the 30 feet, given that the flare issue that Michael brought up was clearly not contemplated by him. We're not going in from the edge of this driveway, we're going out. I think I would rather see the 30-foot opening moved towards the shed and the garage and make him fill in on, as I look at this picture, the left side, and forget the pretense of a flare, because there is none. Yeah, I'm going to ask that, go ahead.
in discussion with my wife on that, when we did come up with a proposal that I had to present to you on how we wanted to do this, the issue with that would be that with the S-turn that she has to do now, if we push everything to the right completely, it even makes more of a dramatic S-turn to be able to utilize the garage. She does park in the garage every night. And as it sits now, when the summertime comes and the pavement gets very warm, when she has to back out of that garage and cut the wheels and everything, I have to reseal the driveway every single year because there's nothing I can even do about it.
You are kidding.
She's marking it up, and there's nothing she can do about it either. So unfortunately, it was discussed with my wife, but pushing it way to the right, it just wasn't feasible for us.
I actually do recall, sir, that your wife's driving was an issue at the last application.
That sounds like a slanted statement.
Hey, you're talking to somebody who makes much more than an S-turn every day in her driveway to get.
Well, Barbara, would you be happy with the reverse plan if you took it all off the right side and made it go in the other direction?
Well, my concern with that is that the applicant is just going to use that area anyways. That's,
You know something, under the law, anybody can drive on the grass on the edge of their property. So if the applicant agrees to a 30-foot opening that's shoved all the way down towards Montalona Road, and he wants to drive on his grass in front of his green storage shed, he has the right to do that because it's not a driveway, it's his lawn.
Right.
So,
I mean,
in my opinion, the town has put a lot of time and energy into this. We've had town administrator and DPW and whoever else went to these court hearings, and our town attorney, which we've paid for. At some point, we need to find some resolution to this issue and put it behind us.
Bill.
I have a question for Sarah. What's the width of Fieldstone? Do you know?
It's probably 24 feet, which is a standard road.
But it's not that wide of a road.
Well, that's what our town standards are, 24 feet.
Well, that's, okay, so if you take half of that, the 12 feet, when you come out, you got to make that right turn. I doubt that the majority of his traffic coming out of his driveway is going to be to the left. The majority of his traffic is going to be making a right turn to get to get back onto the main road.
Correct.
Okay?
Fieldstone's a dead
So,
With my, excuse me, I'm sorry. May I?
but it seems to me that because of that, it's the location of the driveway just appears functionally to be more efficient moved towards Montalona. This is a compromise. I see this as a compromise because he's taking the same amount off of both sides. I mean, if it's going to be moved, it would seem to me you'd want that radii on the Montalona side. So, I mean, it's...
Yes.
If you can see in this picture here, I know you people have it right here. This is where I store my truck because I can't leave them hooked up
Are
together.
you running a commercial operation out of that house?
No.
Okay.
No. This is where I store my truck. If I had left them hooked up, they would stick out on the road. So as I enter, as you said, sir, this is Montalona Road. As I enter, I can't even make this in one swoop. I actually have to make a three-point turn because I would run over the curbing on the opposite side of Fieldstone. So if it was pushed to the left, if I had to do one way or the other, pushing it to Montalona Road from where it sits now out 30 feet would be much more feasible for me than having it pushed to the right, even if nothing else for my wife to be able to park better.
The applicant's asking for a 30-foot opening. If he wants to put it to the left or the right in the middle, I think we should let it up to the applicant if this is granted, instead of telling him where to put it.
Just,
Is
it's
that
30 feet.
I don't care if he puts it in the middle or on the left or on the right. It's his decision if this gets granted. And I think that's where our discussion should end.
And a permit with DPW is recommended.
Yes. You agree to that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Further comment from board members?
We haven't discussed whether that 30 feet includes the radii.
There are no,
No.
your radius is part of your total opening.
Yes. And
Which means if you're 24 feet or 22 feet, whatever the town ordinance is, that includes the 2 5-foot radiuses from side to side. So there's no adding any radiuses to this.
The
This is
opening is 30
feet, cut and dried.
if we agree. Jim?
No, I'm just thinking. I guess I have a question. Is this coming to us with a recommendation from the town council or Derek or anybody?
No. They just said, make a decision either way.
Okay. Board members, Struthers?
I'd like to see this be put to bed tonight
I would like to go to bed tonight.
in an affirmative action.
I'll make a motion then that, given the location of this driveway that was relocated in connection with the development of the project, and the limited turning radius and access caused by the relocation of the driveway, that we find that the 22-foot width would cause a practical difficulty. And on that basis, we granted a waiver for a no wider than a 30-foot entrance on Mount.
No cross.
No Crest Road, I'm sorry.
Second.
Been moved and seconded?
Subject to a
Subject
permit.
to the permit and the closure or seeking permits of the other openings that are being used as on DPW's recommendation.
I'll second
Until
that.
they would obtain
Michael
approval.
already did it.
Oh.
Michael already did it.
You
yeah.
seconded.
Can you say that again? Subject?
Well, subject to the conditions that were in Sarah's report.
Okay. Sarah?
One of the conditions that I had, I got a little more education, and it should be removed. The mention of the driveway that's not on his lot can't be enforced with this one, because it's a completely separate lot.
All right, understood in regards to the motion. The other driveway.
So you strike that part of your motion?
Yeah. All right, is there any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? Carries unanimously. Good night.
Thank you very much.
Night.
We have some other business before I need to go back to the beginning.
I didn't either.
This is a discussion in regards to a
Back in
follow-up
2
on
years.
a zoning violation. This is scheduled for other business discussion for the board members. This is in regards to map 18, lots 30 and 32. This is Paris Collision Auto Body or North Star Auto Sales and Big Al's Property Care located at Petain Street, Mast Road. So this is a site plan compliance issue that was brought to the town's attention by an abutter. Some board members had mentioned it off and on over the years. Where do we stand on this, Joanne?
So, I invited the owner of the property here. He's not here.
Oh, Chuck? No, he's not here.
He's not here. So, the issue right now is Nancy had been...
Do we have a plan in front of us? We don't, do we?
No, I
Okay,
just
that's
have
all right.
this,
Okay.
but you have a report from, so the way it was left at the last meeting was, you had asked for a list of violations of the Big Al site.
Right.
That was provided by Nancy, it's in your packet.
Right.
And you were going to talk about the possibility
That's in the
of
page
revoking the site plan approval for the landscaping.
I'll make that motion right now.
Well, let's get through that.
What did you just make a motion for, Tim? I
To revoke the site plan.
No, let's go through it.
That'll cut the discussion right out.
So in the meantime, I got the report from Nancy, it's included in your packet. We looked at the approval that we have on file for the landscaping business, which was a different company.
I remember that.
Back in 2010. And it specifically says that the purpose of this plan is to show information for a proposed landscaping business located on a portion of map 18, lot 30, and for no other purpose. So when Nancy went out there to do her inspections, she found that there were, the business itself is doing a lot of other things, like renting dumpsters, and there was, they seem to clean out houses, and
We saw some pictures.
so you have that whole file that you received the last time.
Right.
So the question tonight is, and I was hoping the owner would be here, is where do we go with this now? Because obviously, the business who has taken over that site is no longer just doing landscaping. And those uses are allowed in the commercial zone, however, they don't have approval for it.
Right.
And many of the uses that they found were questionable as far as safety, public safety and health reasons. One thing that I'd like to bring to your attention that the building inspector informed me of the other day, and there's a picture or two pictures in your packet, is that there is some sort of a mobile RV that they're using as their office space, and there's a extension cord plugged in running from that RV to somewhere for power, which obviously is not legit and could be, a safety issue. So I was asked to provide you with the information as to when you would review it and decide whether you would want to revoke the site plan approval or to speak with the owner to see if we could do something about this. But I haven't heard from the owner. I didn't realize he wasn't coming.
Board members, Tim.
Jim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well,
He actually raised, oh, okay.
I was raising Tim's hand so he could talk. We said this last time, so I sound like broken record. There's really two avenues here. One is code enforcement, which isn't what this board does. And it's cries for code enforcement. So it doesn't have to come before us. It seems to me the code enforcement officer has enough to issue a
Cease and desist.
or whatever other remedy they want. Why is it before us? But we do have the authority to hold to revoke site plan approval. So you're asking us, get an example of the former is the electrical. That's not a site plan, that's not a plan board, that's a code enforcement.
Do we have, is our code enforcement officer available right now?
No, it's not our jurisdiction. Our jurisdiction is to
Right.
revoke.
We either revoke the site plan or not.
And to do that, we can request that code enforcement, but we don't have the power to compel it as a board. And if we're going to revoke site plan, we have to give them notice of the reasons. So you need to come up with that list before you do it. You can't add to it. It's like an indictment.
Okay.
You don't. So, we just don't kind of say we're going to revoke site plan. No, for the following reasons, list them, and then you can either take that action and they can request a hearing, or we can schedule a hearing, which is usually what we would do. If we want to go that route, I would like Joanne to come back with the specific violations that we could then use as the basis for our action. And maybe we have them, but I haven't seen it. And the concern is you can't leave any out. You need to.
Your
your statement is exactly how we ended the last hearing.
Yeah.
Right, and this is what I have here.
We have some comments from the zoning enforcement officer that the property is not in compliance with the previous plan.
All right.
Is that
Present plan.
sufficient for us to act on?
Phil?
Big Al's is not the owner of the property, is that correct?
Correct,
Okay, now that site plan is issued to the property owner.
correct.
Okay, now, right here, what we're discussing is a tenant on the property owner. It would seem to me that that the violations are from one of the tenants. Those violations should be made known to the property owner.
They have.
They haven't.
Yeah.
Okay, so those,
And he was supposed to be here to discuss it.
but it seems to me that, as was just stated, that it's a code enforcement issue, and if code enforcement issue would be the first method, and I think this is the last step.
Well, at the last meeting, you all had asked me to bring you the list of violations. I asked Nancy for that list. It's in your packet. And you were going to decide whether you were going to revoke or which direction you were going, so.
Were you able to look at the site plan and see if the site was constructed in accordance with the site plan that was approved, including curbing, cuts, and such out on Mast Road?
Most of that has gone away over the years.
What does gone away mean?
It was approved in 2010. Well, the landscaping on the side.
Right.
Inside the area where the landscaping business was initially approved has changed. There's dumpsters back there now, where before it was the bins with the, bark mulch.
Specifically, was there a curb requirement at Mast Road to shrink the entrance there?
There was a curb requirement to have it be
Along the side
one-way.
street. It was supposed to add curbing.
And there was supposed to be an entrance in from Patain Street, which was never constructed.
So in other words, they're not in compliance with the site plan?
Correct.
That's all I want to hear.
Okay.
Okay, because I guess this was not what I was expecting for a memo, what Nancy sent us. Is that what you're telling us the list is?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get one?
Because all I see on this is a fairly vague statement that says, "The present use of the fenced enclosure is inconsistent with and in violation of the final site plan." What the heck does that mean?
You're looking for the actual statements from the plan.
Right. And this, to me, does not satisfy in any way what we requested, and that one of the conditions was landscaping. The landscaping didn't occur. I guess that can be in violations.
Curbing didn't occur?
I mean, I expected a list of curbing and all of that stuff. I mean, undesirable preventable elements of pollution, she just lists this stuff, but doesn't tell me any specifics that would be adequate either to revoke a site plan or, in my opinion, to issue a formal notice of zoning violations for which fines could begin to accrue. I mean...
How do you get there, then?
I don't know, but this letter certainly doesn't get me anywhere. Jim?
Well, I think what you do is you look at the uses that were approved in the site plan approval and contrast it with the uses currently. So it's a use violation, but we're also, you're listing now site plan, physical things that weren't done, so you want to include those in your list. The whole idea is to make this list as long and complete as possible.
I mean, I guess when I say I don't know how you do it, it appeared to me that was the obvious thing that we asked it for, and we didn't get it. Tim?
Could we ask if Sarah needs to be here any longer?
Yeah, there are a few more items.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We got to do that.
Nancy's on medical leave right now, so I would have to speak to Derek about what he wants to do
Like,
with
I think
this.
it's just go out and looking at the plan and looking at the property.
I mean, based
You
on the
have to list-
file, quite honestly, you should be able to do
You
it.
don't have
based
to
on-
list everything, we just have to have enough that it's,
Some of the things that were listed, if you called the Department of Environmental Services, Solid Waste Division, they'd go down there and they'd inspect that property and there'd be a problem.
but that doesn't help us.
Well, and I'm a little confused as to why there hasn't been something done in regards to the extension cord to a trailer outside running a business out of it. I don't understand why that hasn't gotten the fire department or the building department down there.
Do we want to hear from the abutters, and they can help us make this list?
Well, this is not technically a
Hearing.
hearing. So I don't really at 10 o'clock want to get into a big thing, but out of courtesy, because they've been here all night, with the board's permission.
Yes.
Mr. and Mrs. Benner and gentlemen, do you want to come down to the table for a minute? This is not a public hearing or a public discussion. This is something that's going on in here. These are zoning code violations that we deal with as a matter of process. You've heard, we expected sort of a more detailed list tonight corresponding to the plan. We didn't get it. That's what I wanted. We've seen your pictures before, and we understand, and frankly, you made some of it pretty clear to us in a much better way than we had seen in regards to what's going on. It's unfortunate. I think it sounded like the owner was initially at least trying to be responsive to some of this stuff. It's unfortunate he wasn't here. I see you shaking your head. But if, as a municipality, if we have somebody who's responding and moving forward, we have some duty to try to work with people. But at this point, I don't have anybody here, and we're asking for a specific list to come down. So, that's the process for zoning code violations. So, if, Jim?
What I'd suggest is the neighbors provide to Joanne that list.
In writing.
Yeah, and then she can incorporate.
Can I say something real quick?
Okay.
We have provided since
petition.
September. Since September, this has been sitting here. We went to Mr. Paris. We pointed out things, so we wanted to be a good neighbor and work with him. Oh, he supposedly didn't know all this was happening, even though he has a business right there. So we went to the town. We got a petition. We submitted it. We've been talking to Joanne.
No,
We've been talking to everybody since
visual.
September, and then we keep coming back here, and it's like, well, maybe you should do this. Okay, come on. I mean,
All right,
we're
Mr.
trying
Benner,
to do everything right.
I understand, and we're trying to do it. When you brought it to our attention, we asked the zoning code enforcement officer to follow up on it. I recall the petition because I think you submitted something in conjunction at about town meeting time. And there's some question over what the purpose was and what we could do with it. And I appreciate that to you, this is going on an interminably long course of time. And so we are trying to keep this moving forward because we understand the issues with it. But right now, and I understand your list of what's being done, we need something much more specific and clear so that someone who doesn't know anything about plans and doesn't know anything about what's going on can see very clearly what we're talking about. Granted, curbing was supposed to be here. There's no curbing. There's an opening. There's no opening. There's a dumpster. There was no dumpster. And we don't have that list from staff yet. So we're going to make sure we try to get there so we can keep this moving. Yes, sir. Could you state
Can
your
I
name,
just-
please?
Excuse me?
Could you state your name, please?
Alan Morissette.
Thank you. And I'm sorry, could you two please, we know who you are.
Dana Benner,
And-
Katie
Katie,
Benner.
Thank you very much. And your address, the Benners, is at?
12 Joffrey Street.
And sir, you live,
I don't live there. I'm Big Al's.
oh, you're Big Al's?
Yes.
Okay, thank you,
And
sir.
I just want to state that when the code enforcement officer came to my property and let me know about things, everything was gone within 2 days
Okay,
that she told me to get rid of. And about the power cord coming out of
Yeah.
the RV, there is no power cord coming out of the RV. There's power on the back of the building in the back with power boxes that it's plugged into. It's not plugged into the RV
Yeah, that's
as far as power goes.
all right, that's sort of not our thing, but I understand what you're saying.
And
Okay.
I'm also letting you know that I complied with everything that she asked me to do. And as far as the dumpsters
Did she give you
go,
any written communication, or was this all just based on a discussion when I
She came
came?
in the yard with Chuck. We walked around for, I don't know, we were there for a couple hours.
Yeah, I believe
She was looking around, taking pictures, and all those pictures that they have, that was one weekend that the dump wasn't open. You go to my property anytime and look at those dumpsters, they're always empty.
Okay, all right, thank you for coming.
For the record, we got his name as Big Al, but I don't know any more than Big Al. Can we have your formal name?
He said Morissette.
Alan Morissette.
Morissette, thank you very much.
Who was Chuck?
Chuck Paris is the
Oh,
owner.
okay. Yeah,
And
You
he's
just-
sick tonight. That's why he's not here.
okay.
But as far as all compliant, if she was here, she would tell you that I did everything she asked me to do.
All right, thank you, sir. Tim?
So, Mr. Morissette, are you aware that you don't have permission to operate on that property in the fashion you're operating?
I'm a landscaper. I am a registered landscaper with the state of New Hampshire, and I have been for 25 years.
But garbage collection and
I don't garbage collect.
dumpster cleanups and
I
such,
do
that's not...
Okay, we are
maintenance
not
and
going to, on
landscaping,
this
that's what I
board,
do.
get into this kind of
Okay.
discussion. We're not
I'm
doing
just
it.
telling you the facts and what I do, and I've been doing it for 25 years as a registered business with the state of New Hampshire.
Okay, no,
And I've
thank you for
Never had a
coming.
problem.
Thank you for coming and explaining from your perspective what happened. She came out, you thought you did everything. Have you heard from
I
her
have
since
done
then?
everything.
Have
No.
you heard from her
No.
since then? Okay. And about when was that?
3 weeks, a month ago, maybe?
Oh, since snow was on the ground.
Since she came, yes, and she wanted me to clean it up and chop it
Okay.
out of the ice and
Thank
whatever.
you.
And I did what I could do.
All right, well, I want to thank you all for coming. The Benners, I understand your instruction. Did you want to say something, Mrs. Benner?
Yes, I haven't had a chance to speak, okay? Pictures were taken today also, all right? First of all, I would like to say that I took these pictures today, okay? This is his advertising, and if you see in the left-hand corner, it says Big Al's Dumpster Rentals. All right, I looked...
That's a
All
part
right,
of what I
we're
do.
not going to get
Okay,
into a back and forth at the table.
I
Just let
looked, okay, I looked in all the zoning ordinances. In Goffstown, we do not have a zoning for dumpster rentals, okay? We don't have that, so it shouldn't be allowed. I haven't seen any loam, stone, or mulch, okay? The previous
Mrs. Benner, why don't you
landscaper-
address your comments to me, okay?
The previous landscaper, I think it was, where was he
Rock
called?
Solid.
Yes,
Me.
we never had a problem with them, okay? They were, this business abuts our property, and they were very organized. They had bins for their mulch, for rocks and everything. We never had a problem. They were neat, okay? And there were no junk cars at that time when that company was there. These two cars belonged to Mr. Paris, all right? And we do believe that this is against the 3.8 nuisance hazard rules. It's junk. They're junk cars, okay? We also had brought his father to court, this is years ago, saying that, that he's not supposed to have junk cars in the property. We have a court order saying that they're not supposed to be there, junk cars, okay? And this is not part of the business at all. This is disgusting, okay? People have seen rats coming out of these vehicles. And when
The junk cars.
this was just taken today. I took these pictures today, so those cars have not been removed. And the junk, okay, that Mr. Morissette saying that he's taken out, he's reorganized. He's hiding the junk, I believe, in this dumpster, okay, because there's a piece of plywood on it. Also, he's putting junk in back of this little fence area, so the junk is being reorganized, but it's still there.
Okay, Mrs. Benner, I tell you what, are those the photos that you've taken today?
Yeah.
Yes, we have
Okay,
photos taken today.
would you mind giving them to Joanne?
Okay, we will.
All right.
Okay, this
Just,
is
Mr.
another...
Morissette, please wait a minute.
This
Just wait a
is
minute.
picture again today of the
All right,
junk.
Mrs. Benner, we're going to wrap this
Okay.
up. I wanted to let you all speak out of a courtesy because you've sat through what I'm sure was a very fascinating meeting for you all to sit through. And I understand that this is a big concern for you as an abutter. And to the extent you have photos taken today, those are the only ones I am interested in, Mrs. Benner.
Good.
I want you to give those to Joanne because we're asking her to take a talk to the town administrator as to how to proceed on this, and that might help them have an idea of what's the situation is and maybe how to proceed. Mr. Morissette, did you want to say something briefly in regards?
I do.
And Mrs. Benner, again, you're making a representation that all of these photographs that you're passing to Joanne were
Yes.
taken today?
Today, yes.
Thank you. All right, Mr.
I
Morissette.
have something to say about the photos right there that she's trying to say something's in. You could come right to my property right now, and those things she's saying that's in my dumpsters, they're plywood covers to keep snow out of them. That's
Okay.
exactly what they
All
are.
right, I tell you what, Mr. Morissette, I'm going to take you at your word, because at 10 o'clock, I'm not going to climb in a
Believe
dumpster.
me, come to my shop right now, and I'll open the gate, and you can see for yourself.
Thank you very much for coming.
word. Everything is empty, believe me.
Well, I don't have any reason not to believe you, and I'm sure we have all put things over things to keep snow out of them, sometimes successfully, sometimes not, so I appreciate
I
that.
have one more thing to say.
Okay, one more,
The
Mr. Morissette.
dumpsters, I fill up with product, and I leave them on jobs also, and I rent them out to help pay the payment on them.
Okay,
That's what that is all about.
all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, have a good night.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you for coming.
Thank you, board.
Thank you for allowing us to speak. We appreciate it, and hopefully something will be done about
We're
this.
trying. It's,
Okay.
you heard lots of people here tonight at this board who learned nothing happens quickly in front of planning boards.
Okay.
Or court, right?
It's been
Okay.
it's over 6 months that we put
Well,
in.
that is a nanosecond in the, all right, now, thank you very much. Now, as to other business, board members, I'm going to deal with what I think is the quick thing. There is a cash surety request for Franklin Savings Bank to have a CO and finish the site improvements in the spring.
Madam Chair, I'm recusing myself.
All right, thank
I'd like to
you.
make a motion to accept the Public Works request and for an approval tracking form here and a surety, cash surety from the Franklin Savings Bank for their CO until the site is able to be finished in the springtime.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. This cash surety is in the amount of $31,500.
That's next week, it starts.
And it has been received. I will need to sign it. Is there any further discussion on that? Sarah, you have any issues with this? You all set? Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstaining? It carries unanimously. I'm passing it around for signature.
I recused from that vote.
Yep. All right.
Ribbon cutting is next Thursday.
Next Thursday. I've RSVP'd that I will not be able to make it. I do have to say, I think it looks like they've done a nice job on the site. I mean, I
Yes,
have to
they
say
have.
that. That little part, the way they put things in the corner with the memorial and all of that, I think they've done a nice job.
Well, I have to say, at the dedication for the monument, the family was there, and they were very, very pleased.
Well, that's nice to know.
The
That's-
Favreau family was there. They were
All
very
right, good.
pleased.
All right, and then the last item, Sarah, I actually want you to sit for,
I'm just moving my stuff up.
okay, is YMCA. There has been a request from the YMCA regarding adding 5 parking spaces as shown on a previous plan.
Do we have that?
No, not adding 5 spaces, but constructing, yes, it looks like this.
15.
Constructing the
That's the one
15
right
that
there.
were
You got
previously
this one and this
approved.
one empty.
Yep.
I didn't mean add, but these are spots, tentative spots that were put on a previous plan application. As you pull into the site, they're to your left, they're along the Goffstown Back Road. As you pull into that particular area.
Can you point them out on the print where they are, please?
Sure.
You can just hold it up in the air for us?
So here's the entranceway,
Yeah,
and they're right, right now there's trees here,
okay.
and the spaces would go.
Good. I'm glad you showed that to me.
Each space has a little circle somehow oriented in.
So, I went and got one of my little books out, Madam Chair,
Okay?
and I have notes from the meeting from the 12/18 of 14.
He's moved 2 times, I think, since then, and he still can find his book.
Which
I am
meeting?
very impressed.
Then I have notes.
Wait, Tim, which meeting?
Our very first meeting on this subject was on December 18th of 2014.
Okay.
And we discussed the parking, okay, the parking lot. And they gave us all the information about parking spaces, and they talked about peak use, and they didn't really need, they had 46 surplus spaces at the time. Then we talked about the site distance was inadequate, and Steve Keach felt compelled to fix the driveway location. But the most important thing was Gene Walker from across the street at 111 Goffstown Back Road stated that the trees had not matured, Right. and they don't want additional parking. Norm Prue was there, the lights will shine into their home. So Steve Keach then agreed with Mr. Prue. And the YMCA agreed to address the concerns. And Rita Prue stated the last they lost the buffer when the new entrance was installed, and prior boards assured them that the buffer would remain forever. I wrote that down. So then we go to the next meeting we had on January 22nd of 15. We talked about this some more. We talked about the Prue driveway, and Steve Keach talked about screening, and another YMCA employee talked about the Prue property and screening. At that time, Hal Jordan was there. He said a private agreement between the YMCA and the Prues would be administered with the town administrator's signature.
Right.
Steve Keach stated the parking was adequate, as is included included with the addition. I talked about the screening, how it wasn't doing well because of lack of fertilizer and care. Jean Walker was there again. She spoke at the public hearing, stated that the landscape is not sufficient. And Steve Keach agreed to put up a bermed arborvitae planting area in the 15 spaces. So then we move over to the meeting of February 12th, and Jean Walker was there again, and she wants to make sure that it was on the record that the screening is an issue and it needs to be put on the record. So Steve Keach at that point represented a berm and screening to be installed.
Which shows on this plan.
So now they want to take that out to get parking spaces.
But that was, they wouldn't remove it, they would basically push it closer towards the road. It would still remain, it would just be,
They're going to dig that all up and move it over for 5 parking spaces?
it's not 5, it's 15.
I disagree. The 24-inch high planting berm is shown in the vicinity of the former driveway, and these 15 spaces has no vegetation over it.
This plan is not an accurate depiction of what is there.
Those spaces never existed, David. Those are a picture of 15 spaces that they want to construct in the future if they needed them. Those spaces never existed.
Joanne, what's the date of this sheet?
This sheet here is from 2016.
It says
May 6 or 16.
May 16.
So can I explain what happened? So the current director of the Y just received approval, funding approval, to put in these 15 spaces that they say that they are now needed 3 years later. The engineer from Keach's office, I had asked him to provide a red-lined plan showing exactly where the spaces would be, if the berm was going to be changed at all, and that there would need to be certification that the site plan, the site distance would be met. He had an emergency appendectomy last weekend, and he couldn't get this here. So I said I'd bring it in front of the board and explain what they want to do. And basically, the way it was left, when I went through all of the approvals and the notices of decision, the last approval was back in 2016, and
That was for the addition.
For the addition for the teen and
What was that, April?
senior center. It was approved on June 9th, 2016, for an amendment to a recently approved site plan. And they took the building, the addition, and they moved it from one portion of the building to the other. and there was no notice or anything except for what you see about future spaces. The only time there was a requirement was previous to that. I think it was 2 plans previous that said the parking, Derek had done a formula showing what was there and what was needed, and they came up back then.
Who did it?
Derek, when he was the zoning officer. And it came up that they didn't need the additional spaces, but that was like probably at least 6 or 7 years ago. The latest plan, which is the plan that we would be looking at,
Of 2016.
of 2016, just said future spaces. It didn't say that they couldn't build them. I just wanted, I felt, it says future 15 spaces. I thought we needed to see something to say, okay, here's where the spaces are going, this is what the landscaping will look like. But I wanted clarification from this board as to whether, once we get that information, as to whether or not they can move forward, because I don't see anything in the last approval that says those spaces cannot be built.
All right, can you just tell me what General Notes 7, Sheet 1 says? Do you know? That's what referred to right underneath the future 15 spaces. Do we know what that note is?
Note 7 on sheet 1, Joanne.
If you got it.
I think that's on a plan sheet, Joanne.
That's what I think. I think it's a plan sheet.
Plan sheet, not a,
Because isn't the issue,
I have the plan. just
wasn't,
wanted-
there's 2 ways to interpret this. One is they had to show the availability of additional spaces in order to meet the zoning at the time, but that doesn't constitute a final design. It's more in the nature of a conceptual presentation versus an actual depiction of them, but they don't have to build them yet, but it's what's going to be built when they decide to.
That's kind of my recollection, because there was
was
a
it?
big discussion about this issue, and everybody agreed that if this was going to
It had to
go
come back.
code, it was going to come back.
There was, I read all of the minutes. There was nothing clear, that's why I'm here, because there was nothing clear that said they had to come back or they could go ahead and build. What I thought was strange was if they could go ahead and build, where was the plan showing exactly what they were doing? And that's why I questioned it to Keach's office and said, because Keach's office, of course, remembered it, that they could go ahead.
Of course
And I-
they did.
And I said, well, we need to have something. We can't just say, oh, yeah, go ahead and build the spaces. So I have the sheet here with number 7. All that
Didn't we
is-
have future possible spaces on the other side of the
There was
building? And
20.
they decided at one point they weren't going to do those?
because people don't like to walk.
Yeah,
Well, I know.
Those
that's
are
what-
still there as future as well. There's another 20, but
Right,
it's in a different location.
Were those part of the plan set that came in as to how they were going to build them or not?
They didn't have any
Right, that was another one of
construction
these,
plans for them,
right.
but they did, it was the same kind of a thing that if there were needed, so,
So we have to actually, I'm bringing that up because I'm thinking we now have 2 spots on this plan where there might be a disagreement of recollection as to what was going to occur between the owner and the board. Sarah?
When we last talked about the YMCA and their maintenance activities with the stairs and everything, we brought up that parking lot that went back into the camp.
Yeah.
And there was a discussion about, well, are they showing future things, like, and then they'll come back for a separate approval? Or were they approved as future? And I don't know if we ever got a conclusion on that. And that's what made me think of this is, I also read all the minutes, and my interpretation of it was they were shown for the purposes of the conditional use permit and the number of parking. There was no conversation about, like, are they actually ever gonna be constructed? It was like, if we need them, there's enough, kind of like the buildable area
Right.
squares.
but the conditional use permit for the last approval was strictly on those 20 other spaces.
So what does note 7 on
So
sheet 1?
note 7 just is the parking calculations. Existing 221 plus 15 additional future, which equals 236. And then it's all broken down by the sections of the building.
So
That supports the position that was just to comply with zoning,
Right.
but
Right.
not the final plan.
Right, that's
And
what,
then it says, all existing and proposed future parking spaces depicted are intended for use by members, guests, staff of the Y, including service vehicles owned by the Y. These no parking shall be, no parking shall be permitted within Goffstown Back Road
I'm
public
going to
way.
make a
all
motion
right,
that...
Jim, let me hear
No,
from
Jim,
Tim.
let Jim do his
Okay.
motion.
All right, okay, go ahead, Jim.
Well, I wanted to be sure that the recollection is, my recollection is the same as Phil's. They provided those spaces, and they were going to come back to us and get permission to build them in the event that they needed them. And why would they have proposed putting a planting berm on those spaces if they had planned to come back in and build
Because
them?
it was an issue and it was brought up, every time they came, it's always been an issue. Everybody agreed it was an issue, and we were gonna do this to solve the problem.
And you go to your recollection, Joanne, of that other meeting in June of
2016.
16, Jean Walker was at the meeting that night.
Right.
She wanted to replant the dead trees from the prior meetings. And then Mrs. Swyatis from next door was there and talked about her land having water coming on it, and the arborvitaes on her side of the line were dead. And Hal Jordan stated at that meeting that they were going to replace those arborvitaes.
I'm
I remember
going to
that.
make a
Okay,
motion
all right.
that we find that the, based on, until we're told differently, the hearing that those parkings are conceptual only for purposes of compliance with zoning and not intended as the final depiction of a site plan. Therefore, the use and expansion of that area is a material change that requires the enactment of an amended site plan. It will show the layout of the parking spaces and the landscaping and berm.
Okay, thank you. Michael has seconded it. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining, it carries. Joanne, I just want to, point out, I went and looked at this spot. I don't think that this plan, especially having the experience we have with landscaping, if they decide to proceed and come back, I'm looking at a sight line issue for the purpose of doing that berm and those
mentioned that
arborvitaes.
to them.
And so, because if they just push them further, they would actually drop many feet, because there's a huge
Yeah.
swale directly behind this area, around that stone wall area. So, I mean, you are talking I would, if they were even going to consider coming in with those spots,
Say it.
what?
They should put up a privacy fence across the whole front of the property.
Or that whole berm needs to be moved back at the same or higher elevation, because it's now moving closer to the people, to the spot we're trying to screen it from, which means you're talking truckloads of dirt are going to have to come in, and we're going to need grade showed on any sort of plan, so we're not dealing with...
You need water flow too, because you're filling in that
Yeah, because you're
swale.
filling in a swale, and we're not going back like Tim did to the place on the back road where we think we have some landscaping that's going to do something, and when it gets up there...
Oh, that was, we were buffaloed on that. We did.
All right, okay. So Joanne, is there anything else that we need to deal with tonight?
No.
Good answer. I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank Michael Conlon for being here. Michael Conlon is our new county attorney and decided that perhaps he would not run again for the planning board. So I want to thank him very much for service. Michael, I have to say, I sort of chuckled at one point, because when you commented how long you've been at the board, you too now have been on the board long enough to be in the circumstance where you've seen the plans before they come back, and you have a memory of having viewed it before. And
I remember this one. I remember Montalona.
yeah, I thought, I was like, look at that, he's here, and he has officially been on this
I've been
board.
listening.
So this means you're not doing CIP, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
But I have a good recommendation for a possible candidate for that.
Well, we'll handle that at the next meeting.
All right, so thank you very much, Michael. Good
Yeah,
luck.
Michael,
I
thank
know,
you.
I understand everything's going well for you in the county attorney's position, so good luck with all of that. And is there a non-debatable motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Good night,
We
Sarah.
are adjourned.